The story begins in an arena, where a man enters the entrance qualification exam of an academy. His arrival immediately astonishes the world's strongest sword goddess. The moment the match begins, he is already standing behind the examiner. In the next instant, Gray swings his blade and defeats the academy's examiner with a single strike. That scene awakens a feeling within the sword goddess that she has never experienced before, the desire to take on a disciple. She senses that Gray possesses a mysterious power hidden deep within him. What no one knows is that, in his previous life, Gray had already achieved the absolute pinnacle of swordsmanship. By relying solely on his own strength, he once inflicted a wound on humanity's greatest enemy. Despite this, Gray still underestimated the true power of the Purger. Ultimately, his heart was pierced by a single devastating blow. Gray believed that this was where his life would come to an end. In the very next moment, he finds himself in a mysterious space. There, he meets a being who identifies himself as Kronos, the god of time. Kronos tells Gray that the power within him surpasses even that of the Purger. It has simply never been awakened. For that reason, the god of time grants Gray a second chance, allowing him to be reborn with his memories and an empowered soul. Everything comes full circle, and the fate of the world rests on Gray's shoulders. When Gray opens his eyes once more, he discovers himself lying in a field of grass. Not far away lies his hometown, the village of Ronaldo. A wave of shock floods Gray's mind as he realizes he has truly returned to the past. At that moment, a surge of pain courses through his arm. Looking down at the wound, Gray recognizes it as a scar left behind from the times Baird used to bully him. He silently vows that he will never again be defeated by people like that. 10 years from now, the Purger will descend upon this world once more, and when that day arrives, no one will be able to stand against it. The god of time once revealed to Gray that his true power far surpasses theirs. It has simply yet to awaken. Gray prepares to return to the village to contemplate his next move. He encounters Baird, the person who has bullied him for years. They searched everywhere for Gray, never expecting to find him in the forest. Baird suddenly throws a sword in Gray's direction. He insists that Gray fight him in a mock battle today, or else he won't be permitted to leave. Gray dismisses the provocation, coldly stating that his injuries haven't fully healed and that they can fight once he has recovered. Baird reassures Gray, telling him not to worry. The weapons they're using are shield swords, which are perfectly safe. As soon as he finishes speaking, Baird lunges directly at Gray. He swings his sword quickly, but Gray dodges it effortlessly. After countless battles in his past life, Baird's attacks appear painfully slow to Gray. The sight leaves everyone watching in shock. When did this guy become so fast? Gray swiftly retreats, creating distance as he picks up a sword from the ground. If Baird is so eager to be defeated, Gray is more than willing to teach him a lesson. The moment Gray grips the sword, Baird charges once more. Gray counters in one smooth motion, knocking Baird's weapon out of his hand. Baird freezes in disbelief, trying to convince himself that the last exchange was nothing more than luck. Gray smiles, excitement shining in his eyes, and calmly assures him not to be afraid. Shield swords are safe. With that, Gray lunges forward and slashes directly at Baird. Even with a shield and sword, a bloody gash opens across Baird's shoulder. The shock sends Baird crashing to his knees, his hands clamped over the wound as blood pours out. Everything unfolds just as Gray anticipated. Before Baird can regain his footing, Gray strikes him in the mouth with the flat of the blade. The impact reverberates. Several of Baird's teeth went flying. Trembling in terror, Baird stammers, questioning how Gray became so powerful. Panicking, Baird shouts for his companions to join him in attacking Gray. In just 2 seconds, they agree on a plan. This guy suddenly became strong and struck him from behind. Moments later, Gray finds himself entirely surrounded. Gray chuckles briefly and asks if they want to end up like Baird. They don't respond. Instead, they charge at him all at once. Gray sneers, realizing he had initially planned to let them go, but they have clearly wasted their opportunity. 10 minutes later, each of them is pinned to the ground. The individuals Gray once feared are now effortlessly subdued. If Gray remembers correctly, they belong to the Celia Sword Dojo, and he's right. Believing themselves strong enough, they have recently stopped training there. That thought nearly makes Gray scoff. With strength like this, they truly believe they're powerful, yet the dojo won't help him improve. But one thing Gray knows for certain is that he'll need the dojo's assistance later on. Gray has never been to the dojo before, but he recalls that entry typically requires a recommendation. Baird advises Gray to seek help from someone else, explaining that if his master discovers the loss, he will surely face punishment. Gray casually swings his sword, warning Baird to stop talking and follow his instructions exactly. The blade flashes, slicing a leaf cleanly in half, just inches from Baird's eyes. In the next moment, Baird rushes forward, eager to introduce Gray to the dojo. "It's this way," he says, ready to take Gray there immediately. As they walk, Baird can't help but ask why Gray wants to go. With strength like his, he wonders why there's any need to train there at all. Gray explains that the dojo has a recommendation slot for the academy, making the trip worthwhile on its own. Another person nearby mutters that even for the academy, someone as strong as Gray doesn't really need to attend. Hearing this, Gray drifts into memory. If this were truly enough, he wouldn't bother at all. But it's far from sufficient. Even the strongest lineup in the world couldn't withstand a single blow from the Purger. Back then, even after unleashing that mysterious power, Gray found that once the Purger grew serious, he couldn't harm him at all. He doesn't realize how powerful he needs to become to truly defeat the Purger. In that moment, even if only briefly, Gray did control that dark power, the very force that once made him the strongest sword god for a time. Even so, his true focus remained on the sword techniques passed down by the Sword Saint. If he could train in multiple sword paths under equal conditions, just as he refined his swordsmanship, then his strength could truly transform. After all, achieving the status of a sword god through dark power was only temporary. His own foundation remained too weak. That's why Gray believes this is the true reason Kronos, the god of time, brought him here. Soon after, Gray finally arrives at the dojo. The leader formally apologizes for the actions of her disciples. She explains that those students have already been expelled and that she will not tolerate such behavior from her own people. Gray gets straight to the point. He's heard that this place can issue academy recommendations, and he's come to request one. Upon hearing that, the woman slowly draws her sword. She wants to write the recommendation, but before she does, she needs to confirm Gray's strengths. She encourages him to make the first move, assuring him that he can attack whenever he's ready. Gray doesn't hesitate. The moment her words leave her lips, he closes the distance, and within 3 seconds, they've exchanged over a dozen blows. The dojo master emits a soft sound of surprise. There's something about this young man that feels unsettling. In her eyes, for someone Gray's age to possess such practical swordsmanship is as if he has survived countless real battles. That alone explains why Baird lost. None of them ever stood a chance against him. Beyond that, she observes that Gray's style is largely self-taught, yet some movements resemble techniques taught in an academy. Had someone trained him in the past? In the end, the dojo master comes to a conclusion. Gray's swordsmanship may be unrefined, but his talent is undeniable. A smile spreads across her lips. He's an uncut gem, one she can refine on her own. A moment later, she concludes that the test has gone on long enough. Regrettable as it may be, it's time to bring it to an end. What she doesn't realize is that Gray has already seen through her intentions and has been waiting for her counterattack. In the next instant, Gray gathers his strength and knocks her sword from her hand, genuine shock flashing across her face. After that, no matter how many strikes she throws, Gray effortlessly blocks them all. Confusion deepens in the dojo master's mind. Gray shows no signs of retreating, maintaining a pace that matches hers effortlessly. What began as a simple test now compels her to give it her all. For the first time, a hint of fear creeps into her heart, something she never expected to experience. At the same moment, Gray raises his sword, a mysterious power faintly swirling around him. Unbeknownst to him, he has begun to awaken that strength. As the dojo master lunges toward him, Gray swings, and the streak of dark energy cuts through the air. She doesn't dare to face the blow head directly. Instead, she retreats immediately, her instinct screaming a deep sense of danger. Meanwhile, Gray unknowingly unleashes that power, leaving his body in a dangerously weakened state. Seizing the opportunity, the dojo master strikes, aiming to end the duel. Her earlier sense of danger was genuine. She just hadn't fully perceived it until she faced the attack directly. As her blade descends, shock overtakes her expression. Her sword has already snapped in two, and the most terrifying part is that she never even saw it happen. Only then does Gray realize that his earlier strike had broken the dojo master's wooden sword in half. If she had charged in at that moment, it wouldn't have been the blade that broke. It would have been her head. At the same time, Gray is equally shaken. He has tapped into that mysterious power from his past life once again. In the very next instant, his mind goes completely blank. His legs give out, and he collapses to his knees right in front of the dojo master. That alone makes one thing painfully clear. His current body simply can't handle that power. Gray struggles to his feet, insisting that he is fine. For a moment, he contemplates revealing that power to the woman. After all, in his eyes, the dojo master is undeniably formidable. He quickly abandons the idea. Even if he explained it, she probably wouldn't believe him, and he can't even control it himself. Letting out a short laugh, Gray brushes it off, saying he just got a little carried away. The dojo master gazes at the broken sword in her hand, her expression solemn. By all accounts, this should be impossible. Her wooden blade was cleaved by a shield sword, and she knows Gray is fully aware of this fact. Sensing her intense gaze, Gray quickly pretends to be oblivious, asking if she's reading too much into the situation. The dojo master slowly closes her eyes. Since he doesn't want to speak, she has no intention of pressing the matter. Turning back to him, she confirms that what Gray wants is a recommendation for the academy. Gray responds honestly, requesting that she write one for him. She informs him that she can indeed recommend him to the kingdom's most prestigious institution, the Royal Sword Academy. However, she refuses to do that. Her reason is simple: Gray doesn't belong there. The words leave Gray feeling deflated, yet he knows she is right. With his current strength, he still falls short in her eyes. At this moment, he lacks power, particularly in the refinement and depth of true swordsmanship. What he doesn't expect is her sudden shift in tone. She tells him not to misunderstand. His true place is at the World Union Academy. The mere mention of the name leaves Gray visibly stunned. It isn't just the top academy of a single kingdom. It's the finest academy in the entire world. Countless elites have graduated from this institution, and even the sword saints once walked its halls. Gray, in disbelief, questions how someone at his current level could possibly be accepted. The dojo master, of course, is already aware of that concern. She tells him directly that he has likely come to this realization on his own. His body is far from the standard required of a true swordsman. At the Royal Sword Academy, skill alone might be enough to get by, but at the World Union Academy, that approach simply won't suffice. Even she can't fully understand how Gray is able to wield such techniques with a body so fragile. Gray lets out a quiet sigh. Everyone at the academy seems like a monster. With his current physique, he barely qualifies to compete. The dojo master encourages him not to lose heart, reminding him that there are still 9 months before the exam. Although time is tight, it is not hopeless. Hearing that, Gray's heart begins to race. Could it be that she intends to train him herself? As he anticipated, the dojo master cautions him to brace for suffering. What follows will be nothing short of a grueling and intense training regimen. Gray is unaware of just how brutal the training will be, but that's precisely what he's hoping for. He bows respectfully, asking his master for guidance. Regardless of the outcome, he is determined to give everything he has to learn her swordsmanship. From that day on, Gray adheres to his training plan meticulously, pushing himself through relentless daily practice. In addition to his training, he is required to consume large quantities of food, with his master making sure he receives plenty of meat. He is forced to swallow bitter medicinal herbs that numb his mouth, all in an effort to harden his body. Swordsmanship remains at the heart of it all, consuming the vast majority of his time. In the blink of an eye, 8 months pass, and Gray's physical condition improves dramatically. Even the dojo master acknowledges that there is little left she can teach him. Now it is time for him to set out confidently for the World Union Academy. Although a month remains before the exam, she believes Gray should not take it in an unfamiliar location. It's better to arrive early and acclimate. Before he departs, she prepares ample travel funds for him. Gray accepts the money and vows that he will not betray her trust. With that, Gray sets off to register at the World Union Academy. His master smiles faintly and tells him she will be praying for his success, reminding him to write to her once it's over. After more than 20 days on the road, Gray finally arrives at the World Union Academy. It's the first time he's ever encountered a place this grand and luxurious. Soon after, the academy starts distributing entrance passes for the exam. The World Union Academy's exam grounds are filled with countless candidates, but only about 20 are anticipated to pass. Rumors suggest that the number of successful applicants varies dramatically each year. Some years, there are 50, while other years, there may be only 1, and in some cases, even hundreds. There is never a fixed quota. Before long, a woman with red hair steps forward to face the crowd. She gets straight to the point, announcing the distribution of exam entry passes and instructing everyone to take the papers in front of them. In the next moment, she snaps her fingers. As the sound echoes, a wave of golden light envelops everyone present. Suddenly, a sheet of paper materializes in each candidate's hand. Gray looks down at his candidate number for the fencing course. The red-haired woman's voice echoes from the platform, explaining that some may be surprised to find nothing written on the paper except for their number and assigned course. She assures them that this is how it works every year. The World Union Academy does not discriminate based on age, gender, nationality, background, or status. In this place, even names hold no significance. Only those who pass the exam and earn the right to cross the bridge will be asked for one. Successful candidates may even choose to use a false name if they wish. The rule leaves Gray genuinely surprised. He never expressed a desire to take a sword-related course, yet the Academy has already made that decision for him. The red-haired woman explains that courses are assigned solely based on appearance. If anyone feels they have been placed incorrectly, they should raise their hand. She promises to personally kneel and apologize. The claim seems far too absurd for anyone to believe. Most people assume the Academy conducted a thorough investigation before the exam. Some even suspect she employed a form of mind-reading magic. Regardless, no one believes that appearance alone dictated their path. After a brief pause with no hands raised, the red-haired woman officially announces the start of the exam. At that moment, numbers appear on Gray's exam sheet, indicating that his fencing test is scheduled for the morning of the first day. Gray curses under his breath. He never expected to be scheduled for the very first day. He had hoped for more time to rest and allow his arm to recover. The red-haired woman calmly states that this is a one-time practical exam. Anyone who arrives late will be disqualified immediately, as punctuality is mandatory. The Academy does not accommodate individual requests for adjustments to exam times. Gray instinctively touches his injured arm, wishing he had a few more days to heal. On his way here, he encountered both an ogre and an ogre general. In that moment of crisis, he once again tapped into the mysterious power. With a single strike, he defeated the ogre general. Afterwards, he required a lengthy period of rest, which is why he arrived only near the final stage of the Academy's exams. His arm had sustained severe injuries in that battle. It appears he has no choice but to take the exam despite being wounded. Before long, a staff member informs Gray that it's time to enter the arena. He takes a deep breath, pushing himself not to dwell on the worst-case scenario. His left arm is fine, and his right can still move to some extent. This exam isn't impossible. The key is to identify the examiner's opening as soon as the match begins, and to end it quickly. Meanwhile, another candidate is battling the examiner in the arena ahead. The examiner suddenly crouches low and swings his sword, sending the burly man flying with a single blow. The defeated candidate picks up his weapon and exits the field. A faint smile forms at the corner of Gray's lips. But he knows the truth. With his current injury, defeating the examiner quickly will be extremely difficult. After dismissing the previous candidate, the examiner turns to Gray and calls out, instructing him that it's his turn and to not dawdle. Gray steps into the arena, his confidence wavering. His right arm remains severely injured. The examiner stands with his hands behind his back and tells Gray to make the first move, assuring him that it's perfectly fine to go all out. Hearing that, Gray tightens his grip on the sword, determined to go all in. This is his only chance. In the next moment, Gray propels himself forward. At the same time, Gray remembers his master's teachings. Swinging a sword isn't just about arm strength. It's about generating power from the entire body and transmitting it through the arm. Now he chooses to put that lesson into action. Even if his right arm can't exert much force, he can still deliver a strike by channeling power through the rest of his body. In the blink of an eye, Gray rushes toward the examiner and swings his sword. He follows his master's method precisely, but he still can't fight, as he usually does. The injury to his arm is clearly hindering him. If fighting without arm strength were that easy, no one would bother training their bodies at all. Meanwhile, the examiner catches a glimpse of Gray's opening and prepares to counter, but Gray is determined not to let that happen easily. That's when he suddenly senses something is off. Why does the examiner's sword feel sluggish? It can't be that the examiner is weak, otherwise he wouldn't be standing here. This means there's only one explanation. Gray has gotten faster. With a sharp whoosh, the examiner's blade swings in, but Gray blocks it effortlessly. Gray quickly compares the examiner to his master. The man possesses overwhelming strength, but when it comes to speed and technique, he falls short of her abilities. If Gray relies on the swordsmanship he learned from his master, he may be able to compensate for his lack of arm strength. Over the next several seconds, the two clash repeatedly, the sound of steel ringing through the air. Gradually, Gray realizes he is beginning to outpace the examiner. Panic flashes across the examiner's face, tightening his expression. A spark of excitement ignites in Gray's chest. This opponent isn't as invincible as he had imagined. He still has a chance. Just as his master once said, she was confident that Gray would pass this exam. With a sharp clang, their swords clash once more. This time, Gray has the upper hand. A flick of his wrist sends the examiner's weapon flying. His eyes hardened with determination. Even with his right arm injured, Gray is confident that this fight is his to win. At this point, Gray is completely confident, even though his right arm is barely usable. He knows he can defeat the examiner. The examiner is quick. He retracts his sword and unleashes a rapid series of more than a dozen counterattacks. Unfortunately for him, every strike is perfectly clear to Gray. Time and again, Gray evades with ease, having fully deciphered the examiner's swordsmanship. In the next moment, Gray channels his strength into his left arm. Without any flashy movements, he thrusts directly at the examiner's body, but the attack is blocked. This reveals something important to Gray. The gap in raw power still remains. Winning with just one arm won't be easy. Despite this, he observes the examiner's movements becoming more erratic. It's a gamble, but this could be his chance. Gray deliberately reveals a flaw, and just as expected, the examiner takes the bait. His heart pounds as he prepares to face the next attack head-on. There could be no mistake. Without hesitation, the examiner swings, convinced that this strike will end the match. Gray nearly laughs. Finally, it's your moment. A wide, committed strike like that presents the perfect opportunity to counter. His body dips low as he channels all his strength into his legs. With a powerful push, Gray disappears from his original spot. In the very next moment, he appears behind the examiner. There's no better time to strike, regardless of the difference in power. Once he's in position, it's all over. Shock fills the examiner's eyes. He never imagined Gray could move this quickly. Gray gives him no time to react. It's time to end this exam. Just as Gray is about to thrust his sword, a shout of "Stop!" echoes through the arena. He stops abruptly, freezing his blade just inches from the examiner's back. Confused, Gray looks up at the stance. Was he about to be declared the winner, but he hadn't actually defeated the examiner yet? Moments later, an announcement echoes from above. The exam time has expired, and the result of the match is a draw. The verdict strikes Gray like a blow. He had been so focused on the fight that he completely forgot the practical exam was limited to just 3 minutes. Regret washes over him, making him feel as though he has let down his master's expectations. Frustration peaks as he repeatedly clenches and unclenches his sword. Without another word, Gray turns and leaves the arena. He did everything he could. If it weren't for his injured arm, the fight would have ended long ago. If he couldn't even defeat the examiner, the challenges ahead would only become more difficult. Near the exit, Gray pauses and slowly turns back. His arm is expected to heal by next year, which means he will have to retake the exam. Time flies, and before you know it, a full week has passed in the blink of an eye. Inside the academy, 6 figures gather around a massive round table, deeply engaged in discussion. An elderly man, clearly the most authoritative figure in the room, speaks first. He asks everyone for their thoughts on the candidates and whether they should provide any evaluations. 2 instructors express their exhaustion, while another contends that this type of group observation is inefficient and should be revised for next year. Immediately, another person counters, insisting that they cannot prioritize convenience over the risk of overlooking a true genius. The old man raises a hand, irritation creeping into his voice. He reminds them that he requested opinions on the students, not on the exam system. In the next moment, recordings of each candidate from the exam materialize in midair before them. The evaluators review the recordings to assess standout performances, then evaluate each candidate's aptitude and overall strength before making their admission decisions. The footage currently under review features the fencing course. Candidates who not only defeated the examiner, but also demonstrated exceptional skill are considered the most impressive. One instructor notes that adding more students would only slow down the course, so it's better to finalize the list now. The room falls silent as the elderly man continues to watch the footage, offering no response. After a moment, he speaks. The qualified candidates for the fencing course have essentially been decided. Is there any further input? At that moment, someone speaks up, asking, "Did none of you notice the candidate?" The old man pauses, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Candidate, is there something special about him?" The one who spoke is Professor Ariel. She looks around the table and presses the point. "Answer me. What do you actually think of the candidate?" One by one, the instructors direct their attention to the labeled footage. A tutor scoffs, noting that the kid's strength appears quite average and that he's left-handed. "I watched that match too," he continues. "Yes, it seemed like he was on the verge of winning. But if he relies on traps and setups just to defeat an examiner, his future prospects are questionable." Another tutor chimes in, stating that while the kid's technique is solid, his lack of raw power keeps him suppressed for most of the fight. After reviewing the entire battle, they come to a unanimous conclusion. The boy does not belong at the World Union Academy. The footage is dismissed, with several instructors shaking their heads in disapproval. Ariel appears ready to argue. Her lips part momentarily before closing once more. Inside, she's nearly laughing. So many eyes are watching, yet not a single one truly sees it. If this is how blind they are, then collective evaluation is indeed a waste. This gem belongs to her. By the next day, everyone gathers again at the Academy's central plaza. Gray's candidate number is revealed. If the paper in his hand ignites, it means he has been accepted. Soon, a powerful announcement echoes across the plaza. The list of successful candidates for the fencing course is about to be revealed. 6 candidates have passed. Gray's heart tightens. This is the moment. Not long after, 2 exam papers burst into flames, one from each candidate. Then they come forward, and these 6 candidates have officially been admitted to the fencing course. Gray freezes, his paper unchanged. That alone tells him everything. He has failed. The broadcast continues. All successful candidates must cross the bridge and complete their registration by the end of today. Laughter erupts among those who have been accepted, standing in stark contrast to Gray's silence. His heart sinks as he realizes he has let his master down after all. What comes next? Should he settle for the Royal Academy instead? Just as Gray and the other rejected candidates sink into despair, the next announcement cuts through the air. God's Eye special admission. In the very next moment, Gray's exam paper flares with a cold blue glow, confirming his admission as a candidate. Shock floods his face. It's not just him. Everyone present is stunned. A God's Eye admission has truly appeared this year. The realization strikes Gray repeatedly. Does this mean he has truly passed? Someone scoffs nearby. Another God's Eye pick. I haven't seen one of those in a while. Gray has no understanding of what God's Eye truly represents. This is the first time he has ever encountered the term. Yet the looks directed at him are filled with disdain. Isn't that a backdoor admission? It seems the World Union Academy has fallen. The words catch Gray off guard. He never imagined that the selection for God's Eye would be perceived as favoritism. Almost instinctively, his thoughts turn to his master. He has no connections of his own, so if anyone made this possible, her influence must run far deeper than he ever realized. As the 2 students who had mocked Gray continued to whisper, an elderly man interrupted them sharply. "You two, watch how you speak about God's Eye special admission." His gaze turned cold. God's Eye is an esteemed category that has produced countless heroes over the past century. You kids don't understand anything. The 2 simply laughed. Naturally, the older generation favors God's Eye. That was their time. One of them shrugged and said, "We know exactly what God's Eye is." The recent admits include Amy White, Bella Albright, Rick Muller, and Jacob Renfield. They were all part of God's Eye. He sneered, and every single one of them failed. Even we, the current candidates, are aware of it. God's Eye has become a joke, merely a backdoor label. But those words struck Gray like a hammer, for he knew the truth. Amy White had once attained the realm of the sword god in his previous life. Bella Albright stood at the pinnacle of magical power. Rick Muller and Jacob Renfield were key fighters in the campaign against the Cleansers. Gray swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. This meant that from this moment on, his name would be placed alongside theirs. The broadcast echoed once more, announcing that the entrance ceremony would begin in 30 minutes. Students who have changed into their uniforms are asked to assemble at the plaza in front of the main building. By this point, Gray had already changed, just like the others. They waited, but no one arrived. For a moment, they questioned whether they were in the right place. Soon, a professor hurried over, offering heartfelt apologies. An issue with the setup had caused the delay. He instructed the students to step back so he could cast a spell in this spot. Everyone stepped back 10 meters, unveiling golden magical patterns that began to form on the ground. Confusion swept through the crowd. The professor gently placed his hand on the ground. In an instant, golden mana surged outward like a powerful tide. A massive golden magic circle illuminated the entire plaza. A golden staircase emerged from the ground, connecting directly to the interior of the building. Gasps filled the air as the dance showcase controlled magic. Was this the true skill level of a World Union Academy instructor? In the blink of an eye, a second golden staircase appeared beside the building, captivating every new student. The magic instructor chuckled and said, "You may step onto the stairs and take any seat you like." The crowd was still buzzing about the massive teleportation array from just moments before. Gray didn't hesitate to take the first empty seat he saw. It seemed the Academy aimed to hold the ceremony in a location that offered a full view of the campus. Using high-tier teleportation magic for that purpose felt absurdly extravagant. Regardless of how one viewed it, Gray had officially entered the World Union Academy. Reflecting on the instructors he had encountered over the past 2 days, he felt a quiet sense of awe at the depth of the academy. Someone in front of him muttered, "Aren't there way too many seats? If they're only admitting 30 students, this feels excessive." Another person laughed and said, "You seriously don't know?" The student being questioned showed no signs of embarrassment. He scratched his head, seemingly unfazed. Aside from sword training, he hardly paid attention to anything else. A girl snapped her fingers, and then she began to explain. The World Union Academy lives up to its name, she said lightly. Top students from all over the globe are being evaluated. It's not just us, she pointed upward. Look, aren't they already here? The eyes of the sword-focused students widened. In the sky, multiple airships approached, accompanied by massive flying beasts. He jumped to his feet, exclaiming, "That's insane!" Gray looked up and noticed a smaller vessel suspended beneath one of the airships. His expression stiffened at the sight of the Strato airship. He had boarded it before, during his time with the Cleansing Suppression Unit. One of the largest airships in the world was brought out just for the entrance ceremony. That kind of excess suited the World Union Academy perfectly. As the airships landed, students from every corner of the globe poured into the venue. At that moment, a large, weathered hand descended onto the podium. "It seems everyone has arrived," a deep voice declared. "Then let the entrance ceremony at the World Union Academy begin." What followed was a speech that lasted for half an hour. Gray nearly nodded off, realizing that even in this place, an entrance ceremony was still just an entrance ceremony. At that moment, a student beside Gray stood up and announced that the chief students of each department would now give their addresses. First up was Leonhard Appius, the top student from the Swordsmanship division. As the figures stepped onto the stage, murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Is that him? The one who defeated an examiner in an instant during the entrance exam?" Rumors even suggest that his swordsmanship rivaled that of full professors. Leonhard Appius, a name synonymous with pure talent. Gray studied him with interest. The man was undeniably impressive. However, Gray found it strange that he couldn't recall Leonhard ever accomplishing anything truly decisive in his previous life. Leonhard first offered a polite nod to the faculty, then calmly asked, "May I speak freely?" Following a brief exchange of glances, the instructors nodded in agreement. With permission granted, Leonhard commenced his task. His opening lines silenced the entire venue. "I have a formal complaint to raise with the Academy." Then, shifting his tone, he added, "But before that, I'd like to greet all the students who have been admitted to standard procedures. It's an honor to be accepted alongside you. Let us work together so that when we graduate, we can become individuals who genuinely contribute to this world." The response was lukewarm and the speech felt painfully generic. No one seemed to care. However, the complaint captured everyone's attention. Leonhard didn't mind. He looked forward to the day when they would stand tall, advancing side by side as students of the World Union Academy. His gaze sharpened, locking onto the back of the hall. "Unfortunately, there is someone among us who doesn't belong here." "Isn't that right?" he said coldly. "Professor Ariel, the one in charge of God's admissions." Ariel clearly hadn't expected the spotlight to swing her way. Internally, she scoffed at the thought of what an arrogant child she was. Outwardly, she smiled gently. Every student here had passed the Academy's rigorous evaluations. While they may not match her strength, it would be unwise to exclude them. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "So, are you suggesting that the selection process for God's Eye is unfair?" What Leon had been waiting for was Professor Ariel's question, specifically regarding the students admitted through the regular exams. What Leon meant was the student Professor Ariel had brought in through the back door, the one admitted through the God's Eye special program. Upon hearing Leon's words, Professor Ariel didn't get angry. Instead, she laughed. This kid truly wasn't afraid, and it was difficult to discern whether it was arrogance or confidence. Leon waved his hand and said angrily, "That special admit stepped forward. Return your uniform and leave the academy because you don't deserve to stand here." However, no one else stepped forward, except for the 30 admitted students on this side. The other hundreds of students had never seen Gray before, and they were eager to see what the special admit Leon had mentioned looked like. Gray naturally wasn't going to stand up in front of such a large crowd. But where was Leon's hostility coming from? Fortunately, Leon was unaware of Gray's appearance. It was a close call, and perhaps Gray could avoid getting involved if he chose not to step forward. Ariel laughed, noting that this year's freshmen are quite energetic. Leon grew irritated. "Professor, I'm serious. Stop admitting students through the back door." In the next moment, Ariel appeared behind Leon and said lightly, "Do you really think you're stronger than the child I chose?" The entire crowd was stunned. Leon, the chief student of the Sword Division, was being told by Professor Ariel that he might be inferior to that special admit. Even Leon looked shocked. "Professor, that joke is going too far. How could I possibly be weaker than that special admit?" Proud by nature, Leon felt deeply insulted. He stared straight into Ariel's eyes. "Of course I'm stronger than him. Do you think I'm wrong?" Ariel didn't get angry. Instead, she appeared to appreciate Leon's attitude. "How about we make a bet?" she suggested. Leon looked confused. "What's there to bet? Just come up and duel me." Hearing that, Ariel's expression changed. The stakes were her job and the child's admission. The moment she spoke, both Gray and Leon froze in shock, and Gray could only think to himself that this Professor Ariel was truly bold. Gray couldn't shake the feeling that Ariel was being far too reckless. With his arm injured, there was no way he could defeat Leon. Hadn't Ariel realized that? Leon voiced his concern, asking if he was expected to face that special admit in a one-on-one fight. Ariel shook her head. I would never do something so crude. If he went all out, someone could lose their life. As an educator, I can't risk a student's safety. The veins at the corner of Leon's mouth twitched, indicating that Ariel's words had clearly struck a nerve. He snapped back angrily. Professor, are you provoking me? If that's the case, I'll accept the challenge, even if it kills me. Ariel remained calm, which is why we'll use monsters as the wager. It's a much safer option. She was well aware that Leon excelled at dealing with monsters. Leon's expression tightened. You're certainly well informed. So, what exactly is the bet? Ariel's request was straightforward. All you need to do was kill the monster I specify. The match would be divided into multiple rounds. Each round featured a stronger monster than the last. Whoever failed to defeat their assigned target first would lose. If Leon lost, Ariel would resign as a professor, and every special admit would be expelled. Gray let out a long sigh. It was such a hassle. All he wanted was to train in peace. If Leon lost, everything would unfold just as Ariel had predicted. Ariel approached Leon with a provocative smile and asked, So, do you dare accept? Leon was confident in his strength, but he needed to understand the type of monster he would be facing. One of Leon's greatest strengths was his refusal to rely on blind confidence. Even when he believed he could handle any opponent, he never walked into an unknown trap. Upon hearing that, Ariel nodded in feigned contemplation for a moment. Then let's begin with an ogre general. If that may sound too easy, I can always come up with something more challenging. The entire hall erupted in chaos. An ogre general was far beyond what students like them could ever hope to handle. Meanwhile, Gray felt a growing sense of unease. Why an ogre general? Was there truly some hidden scheme just as Leon suspected? Leon slammed his fist onto the table. Professor Ariel, I respect you, but this has to be a joke. He growled. An ogre general is not something a single person can defeat alone. Ariel clarified that he wouldn't be sent to kill an ogre general right away. Instead, she would set the time frame to a full year, which she felt was reasonable. Leon remained unconvinced. If it were possible for someone to train for just 1 year and single-handedly defeat a disaster-level monster, then people would no longer be suffering. He urged for a more realistic target, insisting that no one could achieve such a feat. Hearing this, Gray's mouth fell slightly open, followed by a faint smile. He finally understood what Ariel was getting at. Meanwhile, Leon, still unaware that he had walked into a trap, pressed on. You chose an unbeatable monster on purpose, so this ends without a clear winner. I won't agree to that. Ariel took a few calm steps forward and added another condition. If it's a draw, you win. Leon froze. If the special admit failed to defeat the ogre general, Ariel would be automatically dismissed, and all special admits would be expelled. Ariel gazed at Leon with curiosity. How does that sound? Leon believed Ariel must be insane. To him, the outcome of this wager was already clear. Ariel laughed and turned away. I'm guessing you have no further objections. If that's the case, it's settled. Leon still wasn't satisfied. Just to clarify, it can't be a weakened ogre general or anything like that, correct? Of course, Ariel said, flicking her fingers through the air. Violet mana swirled around her ring as she forged a magical contract. A sleek pen wrote in Madeira, outlining the terms. Soon, the completed contract was presented to Leon. Every detail was meticulously outlined in the magical pact. If he had no objections, he could sign it right away. Leon carefully reviewed the contract and found no issues. He picked up the pen and signed his name, officially agreeing to the match. Confident of victory, Leon still asked, Do you really think that kid can win? Ariel replied that she didn't know. It depended on how hard he trained. With everything completed, Ariel calmly took her seat. Most of the other instructors believed that Ariel had completely lost her mind. Seated in the back, Gray exhaled deeply, finding the entire discussion painfully dull. When Ariel set the time frame to a full year, Gray sensed something was off. Could it be that the one he had defeated before enrollment was being counted as well? At that moment, Ariel locked eyes with Gray. Gray's heart skipped a beat. From that look alone, he knew his guess was likely correct. The wager had been decided from the very beginning. Ariel gave Gray a subtle shushing gesture, her eyes filled with amusement. Not long after, Gray attended his very first magic class. Standing at the podium, the magic instructor spoke calmly. Some of you may be surprised that we're starting lessons on the first day, but as Academy students, you must remember that no day can be wasted. He then began to explain the most fundamental aspect of magic, how to use it. Within our bodies lies an invisible energy known as ether. By harnessing our internal magic circuits, we can cast spells. Gray sat in the very back row. He had been concerned about falling behind, but for now, he was able to keep up. He had already heard a nearly identical explanation back at the training camp. Gray lowered his gaze slightly, burdened by yet another problem. He found himself in the same class as that unbearably arrogant guy. With a wry smile, Gray thought to himself, I don't have time to play along with you people. Just don't figure out that I'm a god. I admit that's special. Unfortunately, the professor noticed the student's expression. You on the far right? You look rather bored. It turned out that the magic instructor had been watching Gray all along. The class hadn't even been going for 5 minutes, and already he was looking around. He certainly had some nerve. Gray hadn't anticipated being seen through so easily, especially from the back row. He quickly offered an apology. In the next moment, the magic instructor closed his book and challenged, if you're that confident, why don't you demonstrate for the entire class? He had assumed that Gray would demonstrate a simple spell. Before the instructor could continue, Gray interjected. With all due respect, Professor, this is a swordsmanship class. I thought it wouldn't be a problem, even if I couldn't use magic. The instructor let out a cold laugh. Even if you only fight with a sword, it's essential to understand basic magic to effectively coordinate with mages. At the very least, you must learn the fundamentals and develop a feel for using them. Gray's heart skipped a beat. The explanation mirrored exactly what he had heard at the training camp. If that were true, would the spell be the same as well? He spoke up before the instructor could continue, asking, are we supposed to learn Ether Bullet? The magic instructor paused for a moment. You know that spell? Can you actually use Ether Bullet? Gray felt a surge of relief. At least that hellish training camp hadn't been in vain. Seeing an opportunity, the instructor proposed a spar. Leon, you can use Ether Bullet too, right? Leon slowly rose from his seat. Yes, Professor. I've trained with Ether Bullet as well. He added, that said, my training hasn't been limited to swordsmanship. I've trained in magic as well, long before enrolling here. Having him face me in the live exchange could be risky. The professor waved it off. Despite the difference in ability, you will both use Ether Bullet only. He won't die, and I won't ask you to hold back. After all, the gray-haired individual behind you is this year's God's Eye student. Feel free to attack. At those words, everyone turned around. The curiosity peaked. A student instantly ignited with excitement. Gray felt a chill run through him, as if he had been thrust into the spotlight, surrounded on all sides. That old man had just exposed everything. The instructor glanced at Gray with a sly smile, as if to say, let's see how capable you really are, skipping class under my watch. Leon stood up again. In that case, I'll teach him what rules are. His eyes burned with anger. He vowed to show him what this academy was truly like. Gray couldn't understand why Leon harbored such hostility toward him. You be the genius, and I'll be the special admit. Why can't we just stay out of each other's way? An awkward expression crept onto Gray's face. He had no idea how long Leon intended to continue his harassment. Moments later, Gray and Leon stepped onto the platform together. The instructor explained that once he gave the signal, they would fire ether bullets at each other. Gray felt uneasy. He had only studied magic for a few days at the training camp. Even though the instructor claimed that no one would die, escaping without injury seemed unlikely. At the signal, Leon swiftly formed an ether bullet in his palm and sneered, I'll show you the difference between us. Gray had no choice. He opened his palm and unleashed the ether bullet he had learned to wield long ago. Leon's ether bullet shot forward first, but its size was disappointingly small. In contrast, the ether bullet unleashed by Gray was massive, resembling a cannon shot. The difference between the two was nearly 300 times greater. For a brief moment, both Gray and Leon stood frozen. Leon couldn't comprehend why Gray's ether bullet was so different from his own, while Gray was equally puzzled by the fact that Leon's version bore no resemblance to the one he remembered. The instant the ether bullet left Gray's hand, it was unstoppable. Leon's face turned pale. If something with that level of power struck him directly, he would undoubtedly die. At that moment, the magic instructor raised his arm, golden magic igniting along it. The spell formed a protective barrier that intercepted the ether bullet, narrowly saving Leon's life. The instructor was left reeling. It had been far too close for comfort. Before he could even begin to comprehend how Gray had conjured such a massive ether bullet, cracks spread across the surface of the barrier. In an instant, the barrier shattered completely, unleashing a violent shockwave that sent both of them hurtling through the air. The powerful aftermath swept through the room, compelling everyone to close their eyes. Leon's body was thrown backward, battered by the force of the overwhelming impact. The instructor rushed over immediately. "Are you all right?" When he reached Leon, he noticed his body trembling uncontrollably. Leon struggled to his feet and insisted he was fine for the most part. Without the protective barrier, he would have been dead on the spot. After confirming that Leon wasn't seriously injured, the instructor turned his attention to Gray. If the barrier hadn't diminished the impact, that single blow would have cost Leon his life. Who exactly was this young man? The instructor realized he needed to have a serious conversation with Gray, as there were too many questions that required answers. Even among the professors, no one could unleash an ether bullet of that magnitude. It felt as though he had discovered an entirely new world. At the same time, Gray stared at his own hand in disbelief. He wondered why Leon's ether bullet was so different from his own. Leon's spell had been far too weak. It certainly wasn't the version Gray remembered. Could it be that the ether bullet Gray learned and the suppression unit differed from what the Academy taught? After all, that training was based on magic theory developed 10 years in the future. Still, Gray asked with feigned confusion, "Did I use the wrong spell?" The instructor sighed. "What you used was definitely an ether bullet. There's no mistake about that." The professor spoke gravely. "The ether bullet you fired was fundamentally different. What you used was not a standard ether bullet at all. Based on my understanding, that was an extremely compressed ether bullet." The entire class froze, as none of them had ever encountered such an advanced form of compression magic. The professor demonstrated an ether bullet, but it was much smaller than Gray's. This is a power that even professors find challenging to control. Yet in that moment, you didn't just fire it, you stabilized and reshaped it into a complete spell. There isn't a single person in this academy who could replicate what you just accomplished. Whispered voices quickly spread through the hall. "That's the strongest ether bullet I've ever seen. Is this why he was specially admitted through the God's Eye? Shouldn't he have been placed directly into the magic curriculum instead of going through a special track?" As he listened to the discussion, Gray found himself deep in thought. Every spell taught at the suppression unit's training camp had been used in this manner. To be honest, even among his peers, Gray had never considered himself particularly gifted in magic. That was why he couldn't fully accept the professor's assessment. "Professor, are you joking? With proper training, shouldn't anyone be able to achieve something similar?" The professor erupted in laughter. That reaction only deepened Gray's confusion. "Was I really?" Laughing harder, the professor exclaimed, "You're a true genius. Having you study swordsmanship is nothing short of a waste of talent." Hearing that, Gray felt a hint of regret. Wasn't that a bit exaggerated? The professor closed the distance in a single step and spoke earnestly. "You should transfer to the magic department and become my direct disciple. I will personally guarantee it and oversee all of your magical training. Your talent for magic far surpasses your aptitude for the sword." Gray refused without hesitation. "I'll pass, Professor. I've always been told I'm bad at magic." The professor dismissed that outright, stating that those people simply lack vision. "You've already mastered aether compression, and at such a young age, you created a super compressed aether bullet. By this academy's standards, you are an unparalleled prodigy, and I can personally vouch for that. I don't know who foolishly claimed you lack magical talent, but they clearly have no idea what they're talking about. Gray, are you really not considering switching to the magic curriculum?" The crowd erupted in astonishment. Hearing such praise from a professor who was known for rarely complimenting others was nothing short of shocking. The professor raised a finger and declared, "If you refuse to study magic, it would be the greatest loss this world could suffer. One could even call it a crime against magic itself." Gray laughed and said, "Professor, you're exaggerating." At that moment, something clicked. The ether compression the professor had mentioned. Gray had heard of it before. His thoughts drifted back to an old lesson. Someone had once told him, "You don't truly understand what OD, or life force, really is. This is why casting the right magic is so challenging. You must continuously compress the ether within you and then selectively use only the portions that intermingle with OD." The instructor had explained it this way back then, and looking back now, it carries a deeper meaning. Gray then asked the professor if he had ever heard of OD. The professor looked completely puzzled and replied, "What is that supposed to be?" From his reaction, Gray realized that the concept of OD was still unknown in this era. If that were true, everything he had learned in the suppression unit would be called into question. It was knowledge from the future, concepts that this world had yet to discover. Gray would need to be extremely careful about whom he revealed this to, as it could lead to serious upheaval. The professor asked excitedly, "Are you really sure you won't transfer to the magic curriculum?" Gray answered calmly, "I'm sorry. I love swordsmanship more. I truly appreciate the offer, but I must decline." The professor let out a helpless sigh. If your mind is already made up, then there's nothing I can do. Still, I won't give up. If you ever change your mind, you can come find me anytime. Gray scratched his head, feeling a bit embarrassed. Thank you very much for the offer. The professor then instructed Gray to return to his seat, assuring him that he wouldn't scold him for losing focus during class. He added that if the lesson felt boring, Gray was free to leave at any time. In the professor's eyes, this basic class held little meaning for someone like Gray. The students quickly engaged in lively discussion. That guy is incredible. I can't believe Professor Carlos holds him in such high regard. Witnessing this today was truly worthwhile. As Gray walked away, Leon instinctively took a step forward. His heart pounded wildly in his chest. A red rose suddenly bloomed in his heart. At that moment, the once proud Leon had begun to admire Gray from the depths of his heart. A chill ran through Gray. He thought, don't tell me I'm being dragged into trouble again. After class, he received a note from Professor Ariel that read, "Come to my office after school." The message took him by surprise. He hadn't anticipated being summoned so suddenly. Gray couldn't shake the suspicion that Professor Carlos was behind this, attempting to persuade Ariel to transfer him to the magic department. Before long, he arrived outside Ariel's office, hoping that his worries were unfounded. He knocked lightly, only to discover that the door wasn't locked at all. After waiting without a response, Gray stepped inside on his own. "Sorry for the intrusion," he said. In the next instant, a sword came flying straight at him. Almost purely on instinct, Gray drew the blade from his waist. In a single fluid motion, he knocked the attacker away, the movement smooth and decisive. The girl froze in surprise, clearly taken aback by his quick reaction. What she didn't realize was that it wasn't a matter of conscious thought. Gray's body had simply reacted on its own. Still, one question lingered. Why was I attacked the moment I walked in? Then Gray's eyes widened in surprise. The girl standing before him seemed oddly familiar. She slowly turned around, revealing her blue hair, golden eyes, and a delicate yet striking appearance. Sitting nearby, Professor Ariel laughed, impressed by the reflexes on display. "It appears my judgment was correct. Bringing you into the academy was the right decision." Two other instructors stood nearby, clearly unconvinced. One muttered, "Bella, were you holding back just now? Did your mentor tell you to go easy? Your form was flawless, but your sword was knocked away far too easily. That doesn't add up." Hearing the name Bella made Gray's heart skip a beat. It truly was her Bella, or Black. In her previous life, she had become a witch, and the very mage who once taught her magic. Ariel couldn't be bothered to humor them. She said coldly, "Are you too serious? Saying something like that? If you can't even tell whether he was holding back, maybe you should consider resigning as professors." The man burst out laughing. "Relax, Ariel. It was just a joke." As he spoke, he casually handed over the coins in his hand. As Gray watched them openly gamble right in front of him, he calmly sheathed his sword, a trace of irritation creeping into his thoughts. "This is seriously off-putting." He then asked bluntly, "You weren't using me as the wager, were you?" Ariel didn't deny it. "We did place a bet on whether you could withstand Bella's surprise attack. Thanks to you, I ended up winning quite a bit." With a flick of her thumb, she tossed a coin in his direction. "That's your share." The moment the coin landed in his hand, all of Gray's annoyance disappeared. This single coin was enough to cover an entire year of living expenses. One of the instructors examined Gray's arm and spoke up, just as Ariel had mentioned. From that brief exchange, it seemed he was deliberately avoiding the use of his dominant arm. It was as if he were instinctively guarding an arm that couldn't move properly. Another instructor nodded. "His right arm is almost certainly injured and in bad shape. This doesn't appear to be a simple muscle injury. It feels more serious. A superficial wound wouldn't lead to this level of pain. It likely suffered a powerful impact or was damaged by an external force. If left untreated, it could develop into a persistent condition." The analysis left Gray stunned. This was the World Union Academy, capable of deducing all that with just a glance. The two chuckled. "If we couldn't see that much, we wouldn't be qualified to teach here. It seems Ariel already noticed during the entrance exam." Ariel finally lost her patience. "Now that you understand, could you two please leave? He is my student, and I won't abandon him. Don't act like you know better than I do." Before leaving, the two instructors made one final remark. They acknowledged his potential, at least for now, and expressed their hope that he would be guided properly. However, there's something important to consider. If that injury cannot be healed, it indicates that he still hasn't fully met the Academy's standards. In that scenario, his journey here will be incredibly challenging. Their warning sent a chill through Gray's chest. It was clear that he needed to find a way to heal his arm. After they left, only 3 people stayed in the room. Ariel spoke again, expressing her thoughts on the situation. Finally, the ones who had been bothersome were gone. Now, let's discuss magic and the girl standing beside you. I heard something interesting today. Apparently, you used super compressed ether in Professor Carlos's class. Carlos told me himself. He even came to my office and requested that you be transferred to the magic division, but I turned him down. As she finished speaking, Ariel gently placed her coffee cup down. Under her gaze, Gray felt completely exposed. With just a glance, she could tell he was better suited to wielding a sword than casting spells. When their eyes met, Gray was startled. Her pupils shifted unexpectedly. Ariel calmly remarked that he didn't seem skilled at ether compression and didn't even look like someone who had practiced it properly. She took a guilty sip of tea, and she saw through it instantly. I really shouldn't lie in front of her. He admitted it outright. He had never received formal training in compression magic. Gray's response was exactly what Ariel had anticipated, as no one could lie in her presence. Still, she was curious about the trick he had employed and promised to keep it a secret, even offering him a reward. Her determination to grasp compression magic was driven by her concern for the girl beside her. I want you to become her teacher, as this compression magic is linked to her fate. Hearing that, Gray began to wonder if Professor Ariel had summoned him specifically because of Bella. Ariel confirmed this. While she excelled in magical theory, her practical application still fell short of the highest standards. No matter what she attempted, she simply couldn't master ether compression, which was why she was unable to create super compressed ether. In his previous life, Gray had heard that Bella Albright was a resonant, and now the reason was clear. According to Professor Ariel, who had learned from Professor Carlos, when Gray used supercompressed ether, it didn't even appear to be compression. If there were a way to utilize supercompressed ether without the need for actual compression, she wouldn't have to be sent to Professor Bradley. Gray slowly set his coffee down, quietly murmuring the name Professor Bradley. In the next moment, he froze. "You mean Varian Bradley?" Ariel nodded, confirming that she had indeed heard of him. Of course, Gray had heard of Varian Bradley. He was infamous. That man had carried out countless human experiments, resulting in the deaths of many. Even worse, he had unleashed catastrophic magical disasters that resulted in the loss of tens of thousands of lives. One of the most notorious magical criminals in history, and even now, still at large. If Bella can't produce super-compressed ether by the end of the year, Ariel said calmly, she will be sent there for what they refer to as surgery. Gray's heart sank. Sending Bella was no different from signing her death warrant. Officially, it was designed to enhance magical aptitude. In reality, it was nothing more than inhumane experimentation. That's why, Ariel said quietly, Bella's life is now in your hands. Gray didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a moment to think carefully. The magical knowledge he possessed was far ahead of this era, and revealing it could potentially alter the course of history. Bella's hands began to tremble. She clearly wanted Gray's help, yet she never pressured him to make a decision. Gray noticed everything. Bella was destined to become one of the core combatants in the upcoming campaign. She couldn't afford to fail. The Arbiter was simply too powerful, and gaining one more ally of that caliber would dramatically improve their odds. Gray had experienced that despair firsthand, and he had no intention of ever reliving it. If the future could be reshaped under his guidance, the world's expedition forces would grow significantly stronger, no longer vulnerable to being wiped out by a single blow. Considering this possibility, Gray let out a quiet chuckle. In that case, why not give it a try? Even if it was just to alter Bella's fate, that so-called future hell, changing it could only lead to better outcomes. In the next moment, as if a decision had been reached, Gray set his coffee cup down firmly on the table. He smiled at Bella. Don't worry, I'll teach you how to use supercompressed ether. With your talent, you'll pick it up quickly. 3 hours later, at the arena, Gray brought over a chalkboard and began explaining the fundamentals of magical theory. Everything revolved around supercompressed ether. This was all the magical knowledge he possessed, and as agreed, none of it was to be revealed as coming from him. In response, both Bella and Professor Ariel reassured Gray, saying, "We've signed a magical contract. If it's ever broken, the violator dies. There are no second chances." Gray waved a hand and turned to Bella. "After hearing everything I just explained, do you have any thoughts? If you do, feel free to share." Professor Ariel felt a headache coming on. While she understood magic, her true specialty lay in swordsmanship. Grasping the concept of OD during Gray's explanation had already been shocking enough. What followed went far beyond her expectations, leaving her mind struggling to process it all. At that moment, Bella stepped forward slowly. Although the magic you describe is extremely complex, its structure is remarkably clear. If I had to put it into words, it feels like attending a magic lecture from 100 years in the future. She praised him with an adorably earnest expression, saying that just hearing his explanation would be enough to advance the history of magic by a century. He truly deserved to be called a magical genius. Gray felt a bit embarrassed. After all, this was knowledge from the future 10 years ahead, to be exact, and it had originally been taught by her. Magic had advanced at an astonishing pace over that decade, making it seem as if an entire century had been skipped. Unable to fully comprehend Gray's theory herself, Professor Ariel turned to Bella. "There's a lot I can't accurately judge. Tell me, does what he's saying actually hold up?" Bella nodded seriously, believing this theory is highly likely correct as it aligns with current magical principles. She believed the quickest way to verify it was through direct testing, which is why we came here today. Bella took a deep breath and spoke softly. "If everything Professor Gray said is true, then this spell I'm holding should work." If Bella's incantation truly aligned with the theory Gray had explained, the resulting scene would be nearly unimaginable. In the next moment, Bella began to cast her magic. This was the first time she had ever unleashed her power without holding anything back. Gray was stunned. Was this really her full power? If his memory served him correctly, Bella's full-strength attack in the future could level an entire city. He couldn't help but wonder just how much magic she could wield 10 years earlier. A massive magic circle unfolded before their eyes. At her current level, Bella clearly struggled to fully control such an overwhelming surge of power, and Gray immediately sensed that something was amiss. However, Bella didn't hesitate. All she wanted was to test this new form of magic. Her lips moved continuously as she recited the spell, her focus unwavering. In the next moment, a brilliant golden light completely enveloped Gray's body. Then the golden radiance surged skyward, as if it were trying to pierce the heavens themselves. Gray was left speechless. This was what Bella had been capable of 10 years ago. It was no wonder she would later become one of the core pillars of the future expedition force. That overwhelming power was enough to instill fear. If Bella had not gained control at the last moment, Gray would have lost his life on the spot. Just moments earlier, a blazing mass of flame had been charging straight toward his face. However, right before impact, the spell abruptly changed course, clearly under Bella's direct control. Joy flooded Bella's heart as she realized she had succeeded on her very first attempt and had even managed to control it. Under her guidance, the flames gradually took shape, transforming into a magnificent dragon of fire. Gray couldn't help but admire her. She truly was a genius. The spell was incredibly complex, yet she not only grasped it instantly but also brought it to life. Gray was certain of one thing. If Bella stood with him, he could one day cultivate an entire generation of magical prodigies to fight the purifiers by his side. The fire spell erupted with terrifying force, only to fade just as quickly. In just moments, Bella's aether reserves were completely depleted. Exhausted, she collapsed to the ground, displaying classic symptoms of magical overuse. Gray rushed over anxiously to check on her. Bella was one of the key pillars of the future, and nothing could happen to her. Ariel spoke from behind him, her tone relaxed. "She's just asleep. Why are you so worried? Bella is still innocent at this age. Don't go getting any strange ideas." Gray couldn't help but laugh in exasperation, yet he chose not to respond. As long as Bella was safe, that was all that mattered. Even in her half-conscious state, Bella glanced up at the flames still lingering in the air, disbelief etched on her face. She had conjured magic of that magnitude in such a short time. Just before slipping fully into sleep, she murmured softly, "The amazing part isn't me, it's the theory." The ease of using ultra-compressed aether is entirely due to Lord Gray's knowledge. However, she was unaware that the theory itself had originally been her own creation, merely brought forward in time by Gray. Professor Ariel let out a soft laugh. "Since she can already create super-compressed forms, there's no longer any need for surgery. I'll personally inform Brad that this matter is cancelled." He felt a wave of relief. They had narrowly avoided a procedure with a high risk of failure. What reassured him even more was that Bella hadn't lost control of her magic. That alone was proof of how terrifying her potential truly was. Turning his head, he asked with curiosity, "When you say it, do you mean her control over magic?" "Exactly, control," Ariel confirmed. "Bradley's procedure can boost raw magical output, but the price is a loss of control. The exact mechanism is classified, but it seems to involve forcibly breaking through internal limiters. Hearing this, he rubbed his chin in realization. So that was it. In the past world, the witch who had failed to wield her overwhelming power had undergone that very procedure. There was no doubt about it. Ariel burst into laughter. But thanks to you, Bella can now produce super compressed forms. That means the conditions of our contract have been fulfilled. With a flick of her hand, she continued. Now it's my turn to honor the agreement. First, your arm. Ariel had already made up her mind. She intended to cast a spell known as Heal to restore his injuries. In the next instant, blue magical energy surged from her palm, leaving him staring in astonishment. She pressed the glowing energy against the back of his hand and started to treat his injured right arm. A powerful healing force enveloped his entire arm, accompanied by a cool, soothing sensation. The spell took effect swiftly. Ariel inquired about how it felt. He rotated his wrist and immediately felt the improvement. What shocked him the most was that his wrist could now move as freely as it once had. Excitement surged through Gray. Thank you so much, Professor. Does this mean I officially qualify for admission to the Academy? One question lingered in his mind. How had Ariel resolved the issue so effortlessly, even when magic healing potions had failed? Professor Ariel laughed softly. Don't group my nerve restoration magic with ordinary healing potions. After that, she hesitated for a moment, clearly still concerned. Your arm feels the same as before, right? Why don't you try swinging your sword to test it? Gray stepped aside and slowly drew his blade. All right then, I'll test the flexibility of my arm. He swung lightly once, feeling a strange sensation that made him frown. Glancing down at his wrist, he decided to try again. With a swift motion, he unleashed dozens of rapid swings, each one matching the speed he had demonstrated in the past. Unfortunately, the results remained far from ideal as sweat trickled down his cheek. Gray stopped and turned to Ariel. My arm doesn't feel as flexible as it used to. Professor Ariel pinched the bridge of her nose and sighed. Just as I suspected. I repaired your nerves, but my magic can't heal the damage to the soul. Gray looked confused. Did that mean the soul actually exists? Ariel nodded. You heard me right, the soul does exist. Even though modern magical theory hasn't proven it yet, I firmly believe it's real. The reason she could express that with such certainty was straightforward. Ariel possessed a terrifying ability that bordered on the unnatural. Her eyes could see souls. This was a secret she had never revealed to anyone. Through her vision, she could see Gray's soul slowly mending itself. As long as he didn't overexert himself with sword techniques, his arm would function normally. Gray frowned slightly. If I can't overuse my sword, does that mean I should take a break from training for a while? Ariel shook her head calmly and said, Don't worry. Training at your usual level is completely fine. In truth, Ariel held a question she had never voiced. What kind of swordsmanship could wound a person's soul so profoundly? Gray remained silent, prompting her to wisely shift the conversation. After all, history did document techniques that were fueled by the very essence of the soul. Ariel's expression turned serious. That man is Amy White. You know him, don't you? Gray felt a jolt run through him. He nodded. I do. However, the question unsettled him. Why bring up the sword saint now? At this point, they shouldn't even know each other. Ariel was convinced. The way Gray wielded his sword bore a clear imprint of training. It was unmistakably a style learned from Amy White. The similarities were far too striking to be mere coincidence. Yet upon closer inspection, she sensed a subtle difference. The one who taught you appears even stronger than Amy. Her brows knitted together in confusion. In just a few more years, Amy should be as strong as your master. Gray was genuinely surprised by her insight. She had pieced together far more than he anticipated. Still, no matter how sharp her intuition was, she could never have imagined the truth. Gray had learned his swordsmanship from Amy 10 years in the future. He couldn't reveal that to her. All he could say was that he trained at a dojo in his hometown. But could swordsmanship truly damage the soul? Ariel responded without hesitation, stating, That's impossible. Ordinary sword techniques cannot harm the soul. A normal strike could never defeat an ogre general in a single blow, much less sever everything around it, including monsters and trees. She was referring to the scene where Gray had slain the ogre general, indicating that she was already aware of what had transpired. Ariel chuckled softly, knowing that was precisely why the wager was essentially a guaranteed win. She had personally examined part of the aftermath. The destruction was nothing short of magnificent, far exceeding what even the most advanced cleaving magic could achieve. This led her to conclude that a mysterious power resided within Gray, and that he had harnessed it. Her deduction was frighteningly close to the truth. Gray couldn't shake the thought that if Ariel truly saw it, things would become complicated. Her pupils shifted once more. I can see it. Power seeping out from a door bound by chains. Gray's heart sank. For the first time, he truly sensed that something was wrong. Ariel was anything but normal. She had glimpsed the door within him. This was something no one could have anticipated. She clearly knew more than she was revealing. Ariel raised a finger, her voice calm. That said, I've encountered powers similar to yours before. I don't believe they're the same, but the feeling is remarkably alike. After hearing Ariel's words, Gray immediately pressed on. What exactly is this similar power you mentioned? Are you saying there are others besides me who possess the same kind of power? Ariel answered without hesitation. Yes, though I can't say for certain whether they're still human. They're called the Purgers. That's what they're known as. Gray completely lost his composure. How much did Ariel actually know, and why were the Purgers being mentioned in this era at all? Ariel's gaze remained fixed on his face. Have you heard of them before? She continued calmly. Judging by your reaction, I'd say yes. Honestly, I didn't expect them to be that well known. Given your familiarity with forward-looking magical theories, I suppose it's not that surprising. That made Gray feel awkward. In reality, those so-called theories were merely knowledge from the future, concepts that had yet to be developed. Ariel asked with open curiosity, how much do you know about the Purgers? Tell me everything you can. Gray hesitated. Should he really tell her the truth? Even if he did, she probably wouldn't believe him. All he knew for certain was this: the Purgers were extremely dangerous to humanity, and their power was overwhelming. They had to be stopped before they ever emerged. If that wasn't possible, then, regardless of the cost, they had to be eliminated. After a moment of thought, Ariel nodded. Your stance may be extreme, but I agree. They are incredibly dangerous. Even so, Varian Bradley still seems intent on continuing his experiments. That left Gray feeling confused. That madman, does this really have something to do with him? Ariel let out a cold laugh. Of course it does. In fact, the connection is significant. According to the information she possessed, the Purgers were exactly the beings Varian had been trying to summon. Gray froze. The Purgers were something humans had attempted to create? Then why had he never heard of them in the future? Reflecting on the past, he suddenly recognized something unsettling. In the previous timeline, the Academy had behaved as if it already knew when and where the Purgers would appear. A chilling possibility emerged in Gray's mind, sending a shiver down his spine. What if the Academy had played a role in summoning the Purgers from the very beginning? If his suspicion was correct, then the Academy was the source of everything that followed. Without a moment's hesitation, Gray blurted out, urging Ariel to halt the experiment. To his surprise, Ariel had the same intention. Unfortunately, the professor in charge of the project held the same rank as she did, leaving her without the authority to shut him down or terminate the experiment outright. In fact, Ariel had already pressured the upper administration to cancel the project, but they had ignored her. This only deepened Gray's curiosity about who these so-called higher-ups really were. In this situation, even Ariel was powerless. Gray simply did not have the necessary clearance. Without an order from higher-up, no one could forcibly stop the experiment. Gray let out a long sigh. They won't even provide a name. The Academy's leadership is far more complicated than I had imagined. Then a thought struck him. If they could prove that the madman was a criminal, wouldn't that solve everything? In the previous timeline, Varian Bradley's illegal experiments had claimed tens of thousands of lives, and Gray was aware of the locations where those experiments had occurred. With that in mind, he quickly proposed a plan to Ariel. He revealed that he knew where the illegal experiments were taking place. If they could catch him in the act, they might be able to put an end to it. Ariel rejected the idea once again, stating that it wouldn't work. Entering a professor's research facility without authorization is a serious crime in itself. If you can't present solid evidence, the only ones who will end up in prison will be us, she said bluntly, unless you already have proof of his crimes. Her words left Gray silent. He lacked concrete evidence, and without it, this matter would have to be put on hold. With that topic settled, Ariel shifted her focus to Gray's power. Don't you want to learn how to control it? The question sent a shock through him. Was she suggesting that it was truly possible for him to master his own power? She shook her head. I can't teach you that. However, there is a professor at the Academy who specializes in dealing with unknown forces. His name is Siskett. Gray's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the name. Siskett, the man who had personally trained the Sword Saint. Ariel had clearly anticipated his reaction. Tomorrow, I'll arrange for you to begin private training with, Gray nearly shouted in his mind. This was perfect. He had come to the Academy for this exact purpose, to gain control over that power. Now, a lead had appeared far sooner than he had anticipated. The following day, Gray started specialized training under the guidance of a true powerhouse. The person instructing him was none other than Siskett Langfellow himself, during a private one-on-one session. What surprised Gray was that the so-called training consisted solely of running. He had no idea what the instructor intended to teach, but he knew one thing: he only needed to obey. At that moment, Siskit suddenly turned his head. Your mind is drifting. I can feel it. You lack focus. If you still have time to daydream, then pick up the pace and run harder. Listen carefully, Siskit said coldly. Only when every last drop of your stamina is drained will the power of the soul awaken. As long as you have even a trace of strength left, we do not touch the sword. Understood? Gray understood the essence of what he meant. Even if he didn't fully grasp every detail, he was determined to follow through. After all, the man before him was one of the strongest. Gray endured a grueling week of intense, hellish training with him. Once the training concluded, Gray returned to Ariel, who inquired about his experience with Siskit. Gray replied awkwardly, honestly, I didn't feel much. I just ran every day, but my body definitely feels stronger now. As for swordsmanship, we only practiced a little at the very end. Ariel chuckled softly, recognizing that it sounded just like the old man's style. At that moment, someone entered, interrupting their conversation. A woman approached and handed Ariel a sealed letter. Gray couldn't tell if it was just his imagination, but as Ariel read the letter, her body trembled noticeably. A moment later, her expression contorted with rage. Gray stepped forward immediately. Is something wrong with the letter? However, when Gray read the contents himself, his expression became equally grim. The letter stated that although Bella had produced results related to super-compressed ether, the inspection concluded that it did not qualify as true compression. Consequently, it could not be officially recognized, and the responsibility was attributed to Varian Bradley. Rage surged through Gray as he couldn't hold back his curses. That man was nothing but a lunatic. Ariel gestured for Gray to calm down. It seemed Varian Bradley was intent on forcing Bella into the surgery, despite the fact that she no longer needed it. Gray proposed a straightforward solution, but Bella declined. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option. The contract was already in effect unless Bradley himself chose to invalidate it. Bella faced two choices: withdraw from the academy or undergo the surgery. The news sent a chill through Gray's entire body. If Bella went through with the procedure, it would ruin her future. In the next moment, Ariel slammed her hand onto the desk, her gaze steady. Gray, I need your help. What she wanted was the location of Bradley's laboratory. If she could expose his crimes, the contract would automatically become null and void. Upon hearing that, Gray smiled faintly. Didn't you tell me before that acting without evidence is dangerous? He asked. So why aren't you afraid now? Ariel's decision was straightforward. She trusted him. If they located that place, it would yield evidence. Perhaps she had believed him from the very beginning, as her eyes had already revealed the truth. She was now certain that everything Gray had said was real. It had simply taken her this long to fully accept it. Gray replied calmly, you should have trusted me sooner. I hope you'll trust me more from now on. I won't lie to you. Ariel nodded and requested that he guide her right away. Then let's work together, she said, and expose everything that man has done. Gray told her plainly that the laboratory was hidden in the mountains near Toriel village. Ariel was familiar with the area, but she was surprised that Bradley had chosen to hide near such a small, remote settlement. Gray understood precisely what was occurring. Bradley was carrying out illegal experiments within a facility that was supposed to operate under official authorization. Ariel agreed. It was the perfect location for conducting secret research. More importantly, the Academy never interfered with another professor's laboratory. As long as they had concrete evidence, they would not be accused of trespassing. At that moment, the door swung open, and Bella stepped inside. Her expression was serious as she looked at them. Professor Gray, I received this letter today as well. Ariel stepped forward and caught the letter between her fingers. She assured Bella not to worry, saying that she and Gray would take care of the situation. Bella had already guessed what Ariel intended to do. Professor, are you really going to confront them for my sake? She asked, her voice filled with concern. And alone? Ariel paused, a faint smile forming at the corner of her lips. She turned back toward Bella, her voice calm and resolute. I alone am enough. Bella still couldn't find peace of mind and instinctively glanced toward Gray. At that moment, Gray asked Ariel to wait. He expressed his desire to accompany her. Bella agreed immediately. This was a matter of her very life. There was no way she could stay behind. Ariel felt a headache coming on. You're dealing with a madman who has repeatedly conducted dangerous human experiments, she said grimly. If he captures either of you, no one knows what he might do. I can't allow you to put yourselves at risk by going there. Gray disagreed. If you go alone, that's even more dangerous, he said. If I use the same power I used to defeat the Ogre General, I should be able to support you. Besides, if anything were to happen to you, I would be expelled immediately as a God's Eye student. Ariel looked at the two of them and fell into a brief silence. Then she spoke. "So please, at least let us choose our own fate. We won't be a burden. We'll be your help." She let out a deep sigh. "From the sound of it, even if I tried to stop you, you would follow me anyway." "Fine," she said at last. "I'll allow you to come, but only on one condition. Regardless of the circumstances, your personal safety is the top priority." Gray and Bella responded simultaneously, solemnly agreeing. Even without words, they understood each other. Shortly thereafter, the three of them set out for the mountain. Under Gray's guidance, they arrived at a building. Bella hesitated. Could he really be conducting illegal experiments in a place like this? Ariel urged her not to doubt it. What was important now was to enter and search for evidence. Gray spoke with absolute certainty. "I'm sure of it. He's in there." Seeing his confidence, Ariel and Bella's expressions sharpened. "If you say so," they replied, "then we trust you." Ariel shared some good news first. Varian Bradley was currently attending a Magic Association meeting, which meant he wasn't present. However, the main entrance was likely rigged with traps, so they would need to break in through a side entrance. From that point on, it was time for Ariel to take the lead. She made it clear that once they were inside, their top priority would be to secure solid evidence. At that moment, Bella hesitated and asked once more, "Professor, are you really going this far for me? Is someone like me truly worth all this?" Before Ariel could respond, Gray interrupted. "You've got that wrong," he said firmly. "Stopping his experiments is for the sake of this world, not just for you. Do you understand?" A moment later, at Ariel's command, all three of them charged forward, with Gray moving faster than the other two and taking the lead. Simultaneously, flames began to gather in Ariel's hand. With a sweeping motion, countless bursts of fire struck the side wall, shattering it apart in an instant. The power of her magic was overwhelming. A single casual spell could unleash destruction on such a massive scale. Gray couldn't help but be stunned. Weren't they supposed to be sneaking in? This was anything but subtle. After a massive hole was blown open in the sidewall, the three of them rushed in. The moment Gray saw what lay within, he froze. The laboratory was littered with corpses, each one a victim of Bradley's experiments. Ariel had intended to search meticulously for evidence, but after just one glance, she realized it was all around her. At that moment, they spotted something else up ahead. Not far away stood a structure that unmistakably resembled an altar. Bella hesitated. What should they do now? Should they stick to the plan, take the evidence and leave, or should they try to save anyone who was still alive? Gray turned to her immediately. "This place is too dangerous to stay. If we waste time, Varian could return at any moment." The moment his words fell, a stranger's voice echoed from behind him. A figure slowly emerged from the shadows. "Were you calling for me just now?" The moment Ariel recognized him, she spoke calmly, asking, "So how did your meeting go, Varian?" The man slowly approaching them was none other than the twisted experimentalist, Professor Varian Bradley. Gray quickly shifted into a combat stance, never expecting Varian to appear in person. Varian replied calmly, "I sent a substitute to attend the meeting in my place. I have far more important experiments here." Leaving was never an option. Ariel frowned slightly. "What exactly is this important experiment you're talking about?" Varian had recently acquired a batch of fresh experimental materials and planned to test them while they were still usable. Unfortunately for him, the plan had changed. Their intrusion forced him to revise it on the spot. Even Ariel's expression hardened, revealing an intense killing intent. Gray, on the other hand, remained surprisingly calm. They had witnessed things they were never meant to see, and being silenced felt inevitable. Varian's gaze fixed on the three of them. He didn't know how they had discovered the location of the laboratory, but one thing was certain. They hadn't informed anyone else before arriving. This meant that if the three of them vanished here, no suspicion would ever be directed toward him. Bella was nearly frozen in fear as Ariel's irritation surged. "Don't tell me you're planning to turn us into experimental subjects," she exclaimed. Varian chuckled softly. "Don't be so dramatic. Your sacrifice will push the boundaries of magic itself. Since I can't let you leave alive, I'll ensure you're put to the best possible use." In the next instant, a massive fireball shot directly at Varian's face. The sudden attack clearly took Varian by surprise. A thunderous boom echoed as the fireball detonated directly in front of Ariel. Instinctively glanced at Bella, clearly surprised by how decisively she had acted. Bella's expression was cold and resolute, with no trace of hesitation in her eyes. Her hatred for Varian ran deep, and there was no mercy in her strike. And yet, to everyone's surprise, the attack had not inflicted any damage on Varian at all. Varian spoke with an almost playful tone, noting that the God's Eye, Ariel, is still as sharp as ever. He added that he never expected his special admit to possess such outstanding talent. He narrowed his eyes. "In that case, I'll need to be more careful. After all, besides Bella, there's another candidate for the God's Eye standing right here." His gaze turned cold and his voice dripped with disdain. I find your little tricks laughable. Mere academy students daring to assassinate a professor? How utterly disgraceful. Bella let out a chilling laugh. I'd rather kill than be killed. It's a shame I didn't take the opportunity to blow you to pieces in one shot. Ariel immediately ordered the two of them to retreat, sensing that the situation was spiraling out of control. More importantly, they had obtained the evidence, and everything else should be handled by the authorities. Unfortunately, their decision to leave was not entirely in their hands. In the next instant, Varian unleashed a burst of dark magic and struck Bella. At the crucial moment, Ariel summoned a golden barrier in front of them. She urged Bella once again to leave immediately, declaring that she would handle everything from that point forward. But Varian interrupted her coldly, declaring, "Futile, this is when my research becomes a consuming flame, a fire that devours defensive magic and transforms it into my own strength." As the two spells collided, the golden barrier started to crack under the sustained pressure. In theory, this spell was nearly impossible to block, with its only drawback being the consumption of rare materials. Moments later, Ariel's golden barrier was nearly consumed by the black flames. In the next instant, a sharp blue light erupted from her eyes. A second defensive magic circle, glowing blue, materialized behind the original golden barrier. Yet the dark magic showed no fear. It charged straight into the defenses without hesitation. Cracks rapidly spread across Ariel's barrier once more. She immediately ordered, "Bella, hand me the spell memory band." Ariel had already captured everything happening on site. Once Scott reviewed the footage, he would know exactly how to proceed. But Bella didn't respond. Instead, she struck her staff forcefully against the ground. Centered on Bella, a brand new defensive magic circle expanded outward, forming a circular barrier. Ariel panicked. "What are you doing? I told you to retreat immediately." Bella had no intention of leaving Ariel behind. Noticing the cracks forming in Ariel's shield, she stepped in to reinforce the defense. Ariel clenched her teeth. "We agreed before coming here if anything goes wrong, your life comes first. Varian's magic is clearly abnormal. Even defensive arrays can't withstand it. We need to buy time. You have to leave now." Just as she finished speaking, her defensive array shattered. Fear flashed in Ariel's eyes. In just 2 minutes, it had broken through. There was definitely something wrong with that spell. As Ariel's defense crumbled, Bella stayed composed. "Even if your defense is destroyed, Professor, it doesn't matter." The black flames surged forward, crashing directly into Bella's defensive magic. From Bella's perspective, Varian's spell was not incomprehensible. It merely needed a different defensive structure. Varian was stunned. "That's impossible. The counter theory for devouring flame is known only to us. How could you possibly know?" Bella chuckled softly. "Recently, someone taught me a new theory, and now every magical formula seems incredibly simple to me." Hearing that, Varian's lips twitched. "So you're saying you broke my dark magic with nothing more than a new theory?" He clearly didn't believe it. His voice turned cold as he demanded, "Tell me who the traitor is. Say it, and I'll grant you a painless death." Bella smiled softly. "Do you want to know who taught me? That's a secret, and I'm not going to share it." Gray was momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected Bella to display such composure. In the next instant, his expression hardened as he stared ahead and warned her that this attack was dangerous. Varian pulled out a small, intricately carved box from his satchel. A dark red crystal fell from his robe. Without hesitation, he crushed it in his hand. "If you're so eager to die," he said coldly, "then perish in my flames." In the next moment, over a dozen skeletal figures erupted from the shattered crystal. They intertwined like tangled ropes, quickly merging into a single mass. Suddenly, a grotesque, gaping maw appeared and lunged directly at Gray. Gray warned Bella once more, but she insisted that she could still hold on. Even so, panic began to creep in, as her mana reserves were nearly depleted. Varian noticed it instantly. "With your reserves, you'll last at most 1 more minute." Bella shouted anxiously, "Professor, attack him now. I'll maintain the defense at full power." At those words, a sharp blue light flickered in Ariel's eyes. Her gods, I analyzed Varian's spell structure at high speed, searching for its weak point. Once I found it, I could project magic beyond the barrier. She lifted her hand slightly, and a thin thread of electricity slipped past the shield. After confirming the weakness, Ariel unleashed her full power. Lightning erupted all over her body. With a fierce shout, she unleashed all the thunder against Varian's dark magic. The lightning struck with astonishing speed and power. The result was grim. As soon as the lightning struck the dark spell, it was devoured and erased completely. Varian snorted. "A counterattack? Ridiculous. At this rate, you won't even come close to touching me." Ariel immediately sensed that something was wrong. The thought that this dark magic possessed such powerful, devouring abilities was unsettling. If she remembered correctly, Ariel's offensive magic was the weakest among the faculty members, and Varian was clearly using the fire element to absorb her magical attacks. Just then, Bella could no longer hold on. She gasped and said, "My mana is nearly depleted. What do we do now?" If one looked closely, they would notice Bella's hands and entire body trembling. Simply standing there was already a tremendous strain on her. Ariel was at a loss. "This is precisely why I advised you to leave earlier. You all continue to underestimate Varian Bradley." The situation had now reached a critical point when Gray stepped forward. He smiled gently. "Leave this to me. You two can rest. It's time for the backup to take the stage." Ariel and Bella were stunned. "Are you saying that the problems we can't handle, you believe you can solve them?" Bella was skeptical. "Your sword won't even reach him." Gray replied nonchalantly, "It doesn't matter. Just watch me handle this." Ariel appeared to come to a realization. "Are you sure you want to do this? Using that power again could cost you your life. Even if you survive, your healing arm may never fully recover." Upon hearing that, Gray smiled softly. He thought to himself, "I'd rather die alone than have all three of us perish here." Meanwhile, Varian, his vision clouded by dark magic, struggled to see the situation clearly. He noticed a red light slowly expanding before him. Then, he saw a young man swinging a sword through the air, though the perspective appeared inverted. The inverted perspective was due to Varian Bradley's head being severed by Gray. With a single strike, Gray took Varian's life. The force of that blow was something Varian couldn't possibly defend against. Gray's expression turned stern as he declared, "Someone like you should have died long ago." What lay before them now was nothing but Varian's headless body. Bella was in complete disbelief. That strike had shattered her entire worldview, but Varian's body and head fell to the ground. Ariel, despite having witnessed the aftermath of the Ogre General's battle, widened her eyes in shock. Experiencing it firsthand was overwhelming. If this story were shared with anyone, no one would believe it. It was simply too shocking. At that moment, Bella noticed fragments of stone cascading down from above. In an instant, the entire ceiling collapsed as massive chunks of stone came crashing down. The force of that single strike had clearly impacted the structure above. At that moment, light footsteps approached, and with each step, ripples spread beneath them. In the next instant, countless pink laser-like spells shot up from the ground, freezing every falling rock in midair. Professor Ariel was still reeling from the shock of what had just occurred. Varian Bradley's magic had restrained her earlier, but handling this was effortless by comparison. She then turned her gaze toward Gray. "By the way, how's your body holding up? That attack was much more powerful than I expected." With a dull clatter, the sword slipped from Gray's hand and fell to the ground. Gray didn't understand why, only that his dominant hand throbbed with pain and was accompanied by a numbing sensation. He bent down, picked up the sword once more, and said, "You don't need to worry. I can still move." Seeing this, Ariel let out a light chuckle. "That's much better than before. It looks like your training is finally paying off." Gray agreed with her assessment. If the person who had used that move back in the village had been the current version of me, I would have only ended up with a sore arm. In the past, I would have passed out for days, and when I finally woke up, I wouldn't have been able to move my arm at all. It seems that week of training with the Sword Saint really paid off. What Gray didn't realize was that Professor Ariel's gaze had already settled on his right hand. Moments earlier, she had used the God's Eye to examine the structure of his right arm once again, and it appeared to have sustained new damage. Walking toward him, she said softly, "Thanks to you, we survived. Still, I'm sorry you had to tap into that power again." Gray reassured her not to worry about it, explaining that it was he who insisted on stopping Varian Bradley in the first place. Despite this, Professor Ariel remained resolute in her intention to thank him properly. Her next words made Gray pause. She instructed him not to use that power again for the time being. Almost pleading, Ariel said, "Please, you have to trust my God's Eye. If you don't, the damage could become irreversible." Hearing this, Gray froze for a moment before nodding to indicate his understanding. Just then, Bella spoke up from behind him, asking if what she had seen earlier counted as magic, and if so, why she hadn't sensed any ether fluctuations at all. In truth, explaining a power of that magnitude as magic seemed almost impossible. So what kind of force had he actually wielded? Ariel interrupted her before she could delve any further. "I'm sorry, but I need you to stop pursuing this matter. And please, don't mention anything you witnessed here to anyone." Bella, with the curiosity of a child, continued to press for answers. Ariel sighed in quiet frustration as she raised her hand, magic steadily gathering around her fingers. Her expression turned solemn as she addressed Bella. "If you can't agree to my terms, then I'll have no choice but to erase your memories. You have two options, memory erasure or a magic contract." The words startled Bella. Naturally, she has no desire to lose her memories, so she decides to sign the magical contract. Upon hearing her decision, Ariel quickly conjured a magic contract and let it float in front of Bella. Without hesitation, Bella signed her name, signaling that the matter was settled and that she would not bring it up again. Ariel then asked Gray how he wanted to proceed. Gray replied that while he shared concerns about the experiments, his most urgent priority was helping these people find release. Though they appeared no different from corpses on the surface, they were actually trapped under a magical hypnosis. Ariel snapped her fingers. While they aren't in immediate danger, it would be wise to transfer them to the Academy medical facility for safety. In the next moment, a brilliant golden light suddenly illuminated the scene before everyone's eyes. The light enveloped all the test subjects, offering them at least temporary protection from external threats. With the test subjects secured, Ariel proposed continuing the investigation. However, as she surveyed the area once more, what she saw still defied belief. Illegal experiments unfolded before her eyes, nearly all involving human sacrifice to create magical catalysts or enhance magical aptitude. Each experiment was brutally intense beyond description. Ariel found no experiments related to the purger, raising a troubling question. Were those experiments conducted elsewhere? Gray found it just as strange. In his previous world, this location had been the site of a catastrophe that claimed tens of thousands of lives. There was no way that simply producing magical catalysts could have caused something of that magnitude. Suddenly, Gray's eyes widened as a memory resurfaced. In his previous world, the force that had killed all those people wasn't magic at all. It was miasma rising up from the ground. Realizing this, Gray quickly called out to Ariel and Bella, who were ahead of him. Bella appeared confused. "Did you think of something? You look really tense." And it wasn't without reason. Gray had a growing sense that something dangerous lurked beneath them. If it truly turned out to be the purger, the discovery would be shocking. He shared his suspicions with Ariel, proposing that there could be a hidden passage underground. Ariel looked down with uncertainty. It seemed improbable. Who would construct an experimental facility underground? For hours, I searched every crack in the ground, but unfortunately, I found no hidden passageways. This only made Gray's theory seem increasingly unlikely. Just as Ariel was about to share her conclusion, her gaze suddenly became fixed. She quickly instructed Gray and Bella to stay put before jogging ahead on her own. Crouching down, she began to examine the ground with intense concentration. I activated the power of the gods once more. The traces were faint, but she could sense remnants of short-distance teleportation magic. It seemed to be a space accessible only through teleportation. Judging by the residual signatures, the teleport distance was approximately 300 meters. Whatever lay beyond that point was likely significant. After hearing her assessment, Gray asked if it was possible to reach a point 300 meters underground. Ariel responded that she could open a short-distance teleport gate. She snapped her fingers. "Then let's find out." In the next moment, a magic circle materialized before them. If there were truly nothing on the other side, the gate would open directly into solid earth. Moments later, the teleportation circle that Ariel had created began to slowly open. What lay beyond it left all three of them in stunned silence. Before them stood clusters of small buildings, each varying in size. Ariel stared in disbelief. No one could have imagined that such an enormous space existed beneath this place. At the same time, Bella sensed that something was amiss. Massive ether output surged in from all directions, particularly from the center where the energy was overwhelmingly concentrated. She pointed to a small building at the center of the area, surrounded by several towering pillars. A look of shock appeared in Ariel's eyes. This wasn't just ether. There was another force mixed in, something entirely different from magic. It was seeping from that spot, and its sheer power surpassed anything she had ever encountered. Hearing this, Gray already had a suspicion. Could that unfamiliar force be the cause? Ariel cut him off immediately, saying, "You're right. The energy contained within that small chamber is the power of the purger." The three of them ventured deeper into the space, halting before a solitary door that stood ahead of them. Almost instinctively, all three suspected that the source of the energy was beyond that door. Ariel carefully examined her surroundings. Although the presence of that power was undeniable, there was no sign of the purger itself. She then attempted to open the door, but it didn't budge. It was clear to her that the door held no power of its own. Rather than as a seal, it appeared to serve solely as a symbolic element of a ritual. This meant that the power wasn't coming from behind the door at all. Ariel shifted her gaze to a nearby violet container-like device, realizing that the true core storing the energy was inside that magical apparatus. What followed was an incredibly bold move on her part. Seeing her actions, Gray was stunned. "Are you insane? Are you trying to summon the purger?" Bella recognized the danger of the device and instinctively attempted to intervene. Ariel, however, remained calm. "Don't move. My gods, I've already confirmed it. This device can't actually summon the purger, so there's no need to panic." A sharp cracking sound echoed, as if space itself were tearing apart. The crack quickly widened, exposing nothing but pitch-black darkness within. Gray and Bella stood in stunned silence as the very fabric of space began to tear apart. "Professor, what did you do?" Under Ariel's intervention, thin strands of black energy were pulled from within the rift. Gray stared at the dark energy, unblinking. There was no doubt about it. This was the purger's power. At that moment, Ariel finally understood the truth. The device had never been intended to summon the purger. Its true function was to tear open a tiny crack at the edge of the purger's domain and siphon off the leaking energy. At the center of the room, a mass of black energy floated restlessly, pulsing as if it were unbound. The core that crystallized this power was most likely derived from human life itself. The traces left behind indicate that at least 10 souls had been consumed, and during the shaping process, it is likely that many more lives were sacrificed. Every conclusion was drawn from what Ariel had observed through the god's eye. Based on her observations, a significant number of the people they had seen upstairs had already been taken away and used as raw materials. Bella frowned in confusion. Why go through all this trouble just to collect power? What were they even planning to use it for? Ariel urged her to recall the earlier battle with the professor, highlighting how Varian's black flames had felt distinctly unnatural. She explained that the black flame originated from the red crystal, which was essentially the finalized form of those experiments. In reality, these catalysts wouldn't be restricted to flames alone. If produced on a massive scale, their potential applications could be limitless. As she spoke, the crack in the door gradually began to close. After hearing Ariel's analysis, Gray suspected that Varian had never intended to summon the purger in the first place. It was impossible to determine whether he hadn't tried or simply couldn't. It was now clear that the space-opening magical device had reached its operational limits. The system they had constructed was already running on fumes. Bella glanced around at the surrounding apparatus. To her, the entire setup was priceless. She had never witnessed spatial distortion magic executed with such precision and power. Ariel nodded slightly. "You're right. Building just one of these would drain an entire nation's budget. And yet, there are 8 of them here. Only one organization comes to mind." Bella initially thought it was the Discar Empire, but that assumption quickly unraveled. Despite being one of the largest nations in the world, the Empire likely lacked the magical research capacity to construct even a single one of these devices. "If it's not the Discar Empire," Bella muttered, "then what country could possibly afford something like this?" Ariel responded calmly, convinced that there must be an organization whose magical research far surpassed that of any empire. Gray spoke up, saying, "You mean the World Union Academy, right? I can't think of anyone else." The realization hit Bella hard. "That can't be right, the World Union Academy?" Ariel's response was firm. "You're correct. This is the work of the World Union Academy. No other research institution could sustain the scale or budget. It appears that the Purger is much more closely connected to the Academy than we ever imagined." Bella, taking her time to process everything, finally voiced her thoughts aloud. "Are you saying the Academy has been manipulating everything from the shadows? But the World Union Academy is supposed to protect the world from threats." Ariel let out a quiet sigh. "You're still too naive. I don't understand why you refuse to believe it, but there's no other organization capable of this. Do you understand now?" Grace offered a different perspective, suggesting that not everyone in the Academy is our enemy. Most of its members still stand with humanity. At least before my rebirth, the Academy's strongest forces were always those battling on the front lines. They didn't hide behind others out of fear. Instead, they stood their ground and became the driving force against the perjurer, strong enough to surpass even the suppression squads. They protected civilians until the very end. After witnessing that future with my own eyes, I can hardly believe that the Academy itself is humanity's enemy. Ariel nodded in agreement. "You're right. Most people within the Academy are likely acting in the interest of humanity and would never endorse experiments that waste lives so recklessly. However, the Academy is home to countless researchers, each with their own convictions. With differing ideals come differing actions. Beyond that, there are facilities that almost no one in this world truly understands in their entirety. The individual supporting Varian clearly holds significant influence. Without this backing, orchestrating something of this magnitude would have been impossible, even with Varian's authority. Bella voiced her concern. However, did that mean they couldn't fully trust the academy? If so, wouldn't they always be at a disadvantage? Ariel's gaze drifted into the past. She had observed the academy from within for decades, and one thing was certain: this is not an organization you can trust blindly. Most of its members likely believe they are working for the future of humanity. Even the mastermind behind this plan probably convinced themselves of the same. The truth is often hidden in darkness, just beyond anyone's grasp. Gray then asked Ariel to search the area, hoping to find something that could lead them to whoever was pulling the strings. Unfortunately, the facility had no communication devices whatsoever. Even the creator's residual magical signatures had been completely erased, leaving the site impeccably clean and nearly impossible to trace. Additionally, there was still one more issue to address. Just as Ariel was about to continue, a massive explosion erupted behind Bella. The sudden blast caught Gray off guard, leaving him momentarily uncertain about what had just occurred. It quickly became clear that the explosions weren't aimed directly at them. Instead, they served as a mechanism of destruction. Ariel grasped the situation instantly. It appeared they had even installed an evidence erasure system. They hadn't detonated the site immediately. Instead, they likely intended to lure intruders in first, then trigger the destruction to eliminate all witnesses at once. As Ariel analyzed the situation like a seasoned detective, Bella finally blurted out, "This isn't the time for deductions. We need to get out of here now." Ariel chuckled softly. "You're panicking way too much, little one. These are just magical explosives." She suddenly pressed her palm against the ground. Professors of the World Union Academy are not so weak that they can't handle something like this. As she spoke, a golden glow spread across the floor. "If I could be defeated by something like this, I wouldn't deserve to teach you." In the next moment, the golden light enveloped all three of them. The glow quickly intensified. With a sharp whoosh, the three vanished from their location, taking the 8 magical devices with them. 3 seconds later, on the lawn outside the building, Gray, Bella, and several survivors were teleported to an open field by Ariel. Gray looked at the survivors. Like him, everyone had escaped safely, but not without enduring their share of suffering. Bella finally exhaled deeply, having truly believed she was going to die. Thanks to her professor's teleportation array, they were alive. Gray couldn't shake the thought of how close she had come to disaster. Ariel laughed lightly. "You'll get used to situations like this after a few more times. We accomplished more than I expected, which made the teleport take longer, but it was worth it. We secured all 8 devices. Once we present these to the Academy, they will no longer be able to ignore us." Soon after, the group returned to the Academy. The professor seated across from them spoke first. "The survivors you brought back are currently receiving treatment at the Academy Medical Facility." The man before them was Orotum Alexander, the headmaster of the World Union Academy. "I thank you for stopping Varian's illegal experiments," he said. He then picked up a report on the magical engines. "Each of these devices is worth more than the annual budget of an entire nation." Hearing this, Ariel's expression turned uneasy. There are 8 devices in total, and there's no way Varian could have gathered this level of firepower on his own. How did he obtain them? Was someone backing him? Alexander slowly set the document down, his expression serious. "These devices were stolen goods. They were captured during transport. 78 personnel were escorting them, and all of them were killed." The revelation left all 3 of them stunned. None had anticipated that this was linked to a large-scale robbery. Ariel's gaze turned cold. "You're talking about the incident from 15 years ago, aren't you?" Alexander nodded. "That's correct. Those engines were part of the cargo that was hijacked back then. The ones responsible were the Blood Wipers. You've heard of them, I assume." Grey Hat, of course, was the largest criminal organization in the world, a parasite infesting every corner of society. No matter how many times they were crushed, they always managed to resurface. At that moment, Gray noticed something unusual about Bella's demeanor and looked away. What he saw shocked him. The usually gentle Bella wore an expression of raw fury. "They're the ones who killed my parents." Alexander rubbed his temples. "That's exactly why, even after being defeated hundreds of times, they always return. No one knows where they're hiding, and no one knows who their true leader is." It's estimated that over 70% of crime-related deaths worldwide are linked to them. Even if their operatives have already infiltrated this academy, I wouldn't be surprised. The issue is that we cannot reliably identify them, and without certainty, the academy will not take action. Confused, Gray asked what that meant. If there were indeed criminals inside the academy, shouldn't they be exposed and removed? Ariel responded on his behalf, her tone calm yet firm. "This is how the Academy operates now. Anyone with talent is given the opportunity to grow stronger, regardless of their background, race, or gender. That's the Academy's philosophy. Even if they are criminals, it doesn't automatically disqualify them." To Bella, the entire notion felt absurd. If someone was a criminal, shouldn't they be held accountable, regardless of the circumstances? Alexander actually shared her sentiment, but the upper echelons of the Academy clearly did not. Bella couldn't help but ask if that meant even the headmaster wasn't considered part of the true leadership. Alexander offered an awkward smile and said, "I'm just an executor of decisions. I wouldn't consider myself part of the true upper ranks." Alexander spoke slowly. Although he was the Academy's public figurehead in name, the authority he wielded was laughably small. "Would you like to know who truly controls everything?" Gray and Bella nodded in unison, both equally curious about the person pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Alexander, however, had no intention of revealing anything just yet. He believed in the importance of gaining strength first. The more power you possess, the more you'll be permitted to understand. Only when you possess enough strength will you be able to approach the Academy's core, and by then, the truths you seek will reveal themselves. He couldn't name the person directly, but he provided a clue. There is a senior whose influence is powerful enough to steer the entire direction of the Academy. Even the controversial policy of accepting criminals was decided by him. At last, Gray understood what Alexander meant. If they could become stronger than that person, might they have the power to change the Academy itself? Alexander nodded in agreement, indicating that this was essentially how it works. In this academy, strength is paramount. Gray and Bella clenched their fists simultaneously, determined to grow stronger and more resolute. Alexander observed the scene in silence. To him, it remained an unsolved riddle. Ariel could not have been involved in the various schemes, which meant that between the remaining two, one had to be the true mastermind. It seemed Ariel's gods had made me as sharp as ever. The thought ignited a sense of anticipation in Alexander. He was eager to discover what kind of monster Ariel would ultimately train. After leaving Alexander's office, Gray walked alone through the corridors of the Academy. He looked down at the black mark on the back of his hand. In this academy, it was evident that only power could dictate everything, whether it involved overthrowing the perjurer or revealing the truth lurking behind the scenes. For now, there was only one priority: becoming stronger. Just then, a sudden sound jolted him out of his thoughts. Gray looked up just in time to see a foot coming straight for his face. With a heavy impact, he successfully blocked the attack. Even as his body continued to be propelled backward, the attacker's strength was overwhelming. Even after blocking the strike, Gray continued to slide backward under the force. The sheer power behind that kick was staggering, leaving Gray bewildered. Why had this person attacked him without warning? If the attacker couldn't provide a reasonable explanation, Gray would interpret it as a deliberate provocation and wouldn't hold back. The student finally spoke, coldly declaring that Gray had no right to be in that corridor. His reasoning was flimsy at best. "A god like you, I must admit, doesn't belong here." Gray slowly drew his sword, realizing he had encountered yet another person who despised special admits. This time, however, it was the first occasion he had been ambushed in a hallway. Just as Gray prepared to strike back, the man displayed a hint of regret, stating he would have gladly fought if the rejecter hadn't already shown up. Gray turned around and saw Ariel approaching at a leisurely pace. He cast a puzzled glance at the student, unable to discern what was truly going through the man's mind. After leaving the corridor, the man's thoughts began to race. The surveillance was too intense, and he realized he could no longer get close. He would send others as soon as possible. His mental state indicated that he was communicating with someone in secret. Who that person was, only he knew. When Ariel arrived, she asked Gray what had just occurred. Gray admitted he was confused, too. A student had suddenly kicked him and claimed that anyone who entered through the God's Eye program had no right to walk freely within the academy. Ariel assessed the situation carefully. No weapons had been used. There was no verbal confrontation, and Gray wasn't injured, which meant she had no formal grounds to intervene. She pointed in the direction the student had gone, a teasing tone in her voice. "Then why didn't you chase him down and knock his lights out?" The question caught Gray off guard. "After all, we're classmates. Isn't that a bit too much?" Ariel let out a quiet sigh. "As your professor, I can't officially approve of that. However, if something were to happen nearby, I might not notice." Sensing the indulgence in her words, Gray chose to let it go. He didn't want to stir up any more trouble. There was something Ariel didn't know, and she couldn't help but ask, "Are gods truly that unwelcome?" Gray nodded. "People sometimes mock us. This is just the first time it has turned physical." Ariel asked once more to confirm. "So they really do ridicule you openly?" A hint of guilt crossed her face. "I'm sorry. If only I had more authority within the academy." Gray reassured her not to blame herself, saying, "Without you, I wouldn't have even made it through the front gate. Besides, Bella and the others will demonstrate that the God's Eye project is not a mistake. Professor, your judgment has always been exceptional." Gray remembered the people from his past life. Without exception, they had been the driving force against the perjurer. Ariel paused upon hearing him. She smiled faintly and nodded, expressing her gratitude. "Thank you for supporting me." Ariel didn't want Gray to treat it as if it were someone else's problem. Among everyone in the God's Eye group, Gray was the one she held in the highest regard. Ariel believed that Elia Cub and the earlier special admits would all become top-tier talents. However, the first time she truly felt someone could surpass humanity itself was when she met Gray. Gray hadn't expected Ariel to rate him so highly, placing him alongside those future powerhouses. Still, Gray quickly dismissed the hesitation in his own thoughts, viewing it as a sign of weakness. The mastermind behind Varian might not have given up on summoning the perjurer. Gray couldn't afford to relax. That was a reality that could eliminate every elite with a single strike. Gray returned to this timeline to ensure the perjurer could be defeated and to seize control of the world with his own hands. 3 days flew by in the blink of an eye. Today's lesson featured a live combat drill focused on swordsmanship. The instructor paired students by name, and once 2 names were matched, they formed a pair. The moment Gray learned it was practical combat, he focused intently. He knew he had to take this seriously. If Gray messed up, people would start criticizing the gods. I must admit again, at the very least, he needed to prove he could keep up with the other students. At that moment, something stirred within him, igniting a desire to showcase his talents once more. His little nemesis, you could say. On the board, the instructor wrote 2 names, Gray and Leon Hart. Leon Hart was the top student, the strongest first year in the course. The instructor said slowly, "I try to match students with similar strengths. Don't hold back. Treat this like a real fight." Gray cursed the instructor 1,000 times in his head. Similar strength, he had barely gained entry through special admission. How was he supposed to stand up to the ace? Leon Hart already despised gods as students. After the events of last time, he was likely eager to pummel Gray into the ground. At that moment, Leon Hart moved behind Gray. Gray watched intently, eager to see what kind of stunt he was about to pull. What surprised Gray was that Leon Hart approached him and said hello. "Hey, hi," he greeted. Gray's expression changed. He couldn't decipher Leon Hart's intentions. Leon Hart looked thrilled. "It seems we're partners now, and I'm genuinely happy about it." Inside, Leon Hart was deep in thought. Securing the top spot was worth it if it meant he could finally face Gray in battle. He trained harder than anyone else, and now he wanted Gray to witness his true swordsmanship. Those words made Gray feel uneasy. Just as he had suspected, Leon Hart truly seemed to be here for revenge. It was difficult not to feel skeptical. Leon Hart's smile seemed overly intentional, revealing his clear excitement at finally having a legal opportunity to strike Gray. At the instructor's command, the class divided into 2 teams and took their positions at the center. The duel began, and everyone fought fiercely to defeat their opponents. It was the perfect opportunity to showcase their skills, and no one wanted to miss out. At the same time, Leon Hart moved swiftly, grinning as he spoke. "Gray, you'd better watch out. My attack is coming." With a loud crash, Gray's blade collided head-on with Leon Hart's sword. Gray felt a flicker of shock. It was no wonder Leon Hart was the top swordsman of the year. His attacks weren't perfect, but they were dangerously close. In the next moment, Leon Hart delivered a powerful strike that sent Gray flying backward. Leon Hart's body moved in perfect harmony with his blade, as if the sword were guiding his every motion. At that moment, he was almost one with his weapon, stepping into a true sword, embodying unity. Every strike is razor sharp. Leon Hart spoke with excitement. "Lord Gray, you're incredible. I can't believe you didn't enter through regular admission." The comment irritated Gray. If Leon Hart had time to talk, he should have been concentrating on the fight. Their blades clashed dozens of times in an instant, sparks flying through the air. Both combatants moved with blinding speed, yet Gray remained on the defensive. No matter how hard he pushed himself, he couldn't shake Leon Hart. Still, that was within Gray's expectations. He had anticipated being crushed instantly, yet he found himself somehow holding on. Even so, despite using both arms, he couldn't match Leon Hart's raw power. Leon Hart's swordsmanship was nothing short of extraordinary. His orthodox, textbook-perfect style, marked by composure, had been honed to a terrifying degree. Despite having memories from his past life and the training of the Sword Saint, Gray lacked confidence in his ability to truly defeat him. In an instant, Leonhardt closed the gap. Gray brought his sword down, only to feel the overwhelming weight of Leonhardt's blade. His stamina was clearly running low. Leonhardt laughed heartily, declaring, "I can fight like this all day." Without the Sword Saint's special training, Gray realized he would have been knocked down long ago. Even worse, Leonhardt's breathing remained steady and calm. It seemed as though this fight hardly challenged him at all. Gray quickly realized that his stamina was waning. He needed to end this now. The professor's earlier words suddenly echoed in his mind. Treat this duel as a real battle. As Gray contemplated those words, a solution finally began to take shape. Simultaneously, Leonhardt's sword came crashing down once more. At the moment of the strike, Gray ducked low, his wrist twisted sharply. Leonhardt's eyes widened in surprise, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events. With a dull thud, Gray kicked Leonhardt in the ankle. To Leonhardt's shock, his body was propelled into the air. As Leonhardt lost his balance, Gray seized the opportunity to launch a counterattack. Leonhardt finally understood that this duel had transformed into a genuine fight to the death. Despite this, he understood that he could not afford to lose. In the next heartbeat, Gray's sword halted at Leonhardt's throat, while Leonhardt's blade rested equally precisely against Gray's neck. The distance between them was razor-thin. One more step, and they both would have perished. Gray extended a hand to help Leonhardt to his feet, prepared to declare the match a draw. However, Leonhardt clearly viewed it as more than just a simple tie. In that moment, all Leonhardt did was swing his sword. Gray, however, was different. If he had chosen to, he could have easily pierced Leonhardt's heart. Leonhardt spoke calmly. "This is only a simulation. That's why you forced yourself to stop your blade at my neck, isn't it?" Gray chuckled. Even with all those protective runes, aiming a sword at someone's heart during a mock duel feels a bit excessive. Leonhardt seemed to accept his defeat. "That means I lost. Lord Gray, you are truly strong." With a smile, Leonhardt turned and walked away. "Thanks to you, I finally understand the difference between real combat and fencing practice, and that battle isn't just about swordsmanship." Gray advised him not to take it too seriously. From an academic standpoint, what he had done could almost be seen as cheating. Leonhardt appeared to disregard the instructor's words. The instructor had emphasized the importance of treating training like real combat, where cheating simply doesn't exist. As he spoke, his footsteps gradually slowed and eventually came to a halt. "Lord Gray, how about another round?" His face was faintly flushed as he spoke. Gray felt utterly speechless. They had just finished, and his stamina hadn't even recovered yet. He knew that his victory had come from catching Leonhardt off guard. In a direct confrontation, he stood no chance. This was no longer about technique. Leonhardt's endurance completely overshadowed his own. At that moment, someone suddenly stepped forward and shouted for them to halt. He declared that, regardless of whether it was combat training or not, this was still a swordsmanship class, and no one was permitted to use anything beyond sword techniques. Someone like you, a mediocre student, has no business being paired with top performers. Don't get too confident just because you know a bit of magic. Gray hadn't anticipated that the blame would fall entirely on him, especially since he hadn't made the pairing decision. Fortunately, Leonhardt stepped in to defend him. The professor made the decision. "Gray is the only one qualified to fight me. So, mind your own business." The instructor was drawn into the argument and confirmed it outright. The pairing had been his decision, and he had stated that he would match students of similar strength. He stated clearly that Gray was the only one capable of facing Leonhardt head-on. Leonhardt nodded in satisfaction. The instructor's judgment was spot on. Seeing the other students still dissatisfied, the instructor added, "If you're that unhappy, step up yourself. Be Gray and you can challenge Leonhardt." The student's face lit up with excitement. This was exactly what he had wanted. He boasted that he had gained admission to the academy by defeating an examiner and insisted that he should not be grouped with students who barely passed or those who failed outright. Unbeknownst to him, Leonhardt sneered inwardly. Judging Lord Gray solely by his admission status without recognizing his true strength reminded Leon of his own past. People who made such assumptions often ended up regretting it. Leon viewed this as a perfect opportunity. Gray's strength could finally be recognized by everyone through this fight. Leon shot an angry glare at the student in front of him, practically wanting to tear him apart. He had barely gotten the chance to spar one-on-one with Lord Gray, and now that opportunity had been interrupted. A chill ran down the student's spine as he looked up and met Leon's furious gaze head-on. Leon thought coldly. For interrupting this, you deserve to die. The student was confused. He couldn't understand why Leon was angry with him. Wasn't Leon always the one who opposed special admits? The instructor turned to Gray and asked if he was willing to accept the challenge. Gray was unaware of just how strong his opponent truly was. If the student had qualified through the regular exams, this would not be an easy match. At the very least, his opponent's stamina and strength were undeniably superior. Even the Sword Saint's grueling training couldn't fully make up for years of structured nutrition and physical conditioning. Gray wasn't overly confident in his technique, but he doubted that losing would lead to his expulsion. The instructor nodded and said, "You won't be expelled if you lose. This is just a practice class, so don't hold back." Gray accepted the challenge, raising his sword and assuming a combat stance. As the match began, the student charged toward Gray with astonishing speed. He shouted arrogantly that it was time for special admits to learn their place and understand their roles. In the next moment, their swords clashed head-on. What surprised Gray was that the impact was surprisingly light. With just a slight exertion of force, he sent the student flying backward. The student froze in shock, clearly taken aback by being overpowered. Gray remained serious. The opponent's strength was not remarkable, suggesting he was likely holding something back. Without a powerful trump card, such arrogance would be unfounded. Unexpectedly, Gray's casual follow-up strike drew blood. The student was knocked back once again. Gray hurried over and asked if he was okay, explaining that he had aimed for the sword but accidentally struck his face, thinking he would dodge. Moments later, the student managed to rise to his feet and grasped his sword once more. In tears, he shouted for another round, insisting that Gray had only caught him off guard. Even the instructor appeared exasperated. "If you insist on getting beaten, then fight until you're satisfied. I'm not stopping this anymore." The second round began, and the student charged forward once more. 1 minute later, Gray glanced at him awkwardly and asked if he was still okay. By that time, the student's head was covered in swollen bumps. Even the professors couldn't bear to watch any longer and quickly ordered someone to take him to the infirmary. After he was taken away, the instructor announced that this year's first-year representatives would be Gray and Leon and asked if anyone had any objections. Gray was confused. He didn't fully grasp the meaning of representative. The instructor explained that in a few days, the top first-year students would challenge the reigning second-year champion. It would be a friendly match, with both sides showing restraint. He added that the first-year students had lost 35 consecutive matches without a single win. This year could be different. With Gray and Leon, both prodigies in swordsmanship, they may finally turn the tide. The teacher's words shocked him. 35 consecutive defeats. Was the gap between first-year and second-year students really that overwhelming? The teacher nodded. In the academy, a single year could change everything. Losing was the norm, even an expectation. If a first-year student could put up a decent fight, that alone would be impressive. A victory, however, would be considered a miracle in the Academy's history. Just being selected to compete was already an honor. With that, the teacher departed, encouraging them not to be nervous and to simply enjoy the match. Stroking his chin, he contemplated the teacher's calm demeanor. Perhaps intergrade battles were not as dire as he had imagined. Still, as a god, he admitted this was the perfect opportunity to prove he was truly capable of fighting. Training was no longer optional. Elsewhere, the Academy's professors convened for what would be their final meeting, focused on a proposal submitted by Budra. Budra proposed expelling Amy White, a special admit in the God's Eye program. This motion originated directly from the professor of the magic department. Ariel immediately objected, questioning why such a proposal was even raised. She asserted that the gods and students fell under her authority. Boja replied that this was exactly the issue. Amy White had failed the third-year promotion exam, but was allowed to stay only because of his special status. Every other student who failed had been expelled, which many considered hardly fair. Ariel refused to engage in further argument and reiterated her earlier point. Amy was steadily approaching world-class combat capability. His current backlash was preventing him from using his full strength. Otherwise, he would have surpassed this level long ago. She asserted firmly that her students were her responsibility to manage, not something others could decide for her. Another professor sneered, dismissing the talk of backlash and hidden talent as mere excuses for a useless student. How long did she intend to keep selling that fantasy? Ariel sensed danger immediately. This had clearly been planned in advance. Amy's strength was genuine, and so was the backlash, but he could harness that power whenever he needed to. However, if he was forced to act too soon, that opportunity could slip away forever. The professors were not impressed. They had heard those same excuses many times before. Was her plan to keep an unqualified student in the academy indefinitely? What they failed to realize was that Ariel acted in the academy's best interest. She aimed to nurture true geniuses rather than dismiss them simply for not conforming to a rigid system. A heavyset professor mocked her, claiming that while past special admits may have been remarkable, this generation was nothing but a group of failures. An elderly professor chuckled as he referred to Jacob, Field, Amy White, and Bella, calling them all thoroughly mediocre. Perhaps the great gods I had lost at sharpness were to blame. It might be time to consider abolishing the program altogether. Sweat beaded on Ariel's forehead. Abolishing it? That was unthinkable. Someone reminded her that the program had been established by the Founders Council and that, with a majority vote, it could just as easily be dissolved. Had she forgotten? Another voice bluntly stated that the current God's Eye students simply failed to impress. Bella may have shown some improvement, but it was hardly significant, particularly considering the ongoing doubts about her mana capacity. Ariel attempted to respond, but her voice was drowned out once again. The professors spoke as if in unison, relentlessly criticizing the gods and the students. Ariel understood now. This was a coordinated effort to dismantle the gods' special admission system. In that moment, she recognized just how little authority she still had in that room. Many professors ultimately cared only about whether the project benefited the academy. If Ariel wanted their support, she had to be careful not to say anything that would drive them further away. Budra spoke like a man who already held victory in his hands, sneering as he asked if she had suddenly gone silent. He suggested that she should at least admit her prime was long behind her. Several professors beside him echoed this sentiment, suggesting that while she may have once achieved greatness, it might be time for her to retire before she completely tarnishes her reputation. Ariel stood firm in her conviction. She believed she could recognize true talent. Those students needed time to grow, and with enough patience, they would prove themselves. All she needed to do was ensure that her students were not expelled before that day arrived. As long as they remained, she was willing to pay any price. At that moment, one professor spoke up, highlighting a student named Gray who demonstrated exceptional promise in swordsmanship. If that was the case, why not have him participate in an intergrade battle? Budra's lips curled into a sinister smile. If that was the case, there was nothing left to discuss. Gray was ready for a fight. If Gray could prove himself through swordsmanship, the outcome would help determine the future of the God's Eye program. Upon hearing this, Ariel instinctively turned her gaze to the Sword Saint beside her. The Sword Saint gently shook her. He shook his head, signaling that Gray must not be sent into battle. Ariel immediately rejected the proposal, stating that Gray's power was ill-suited for mock combat in real-life death battles. However, the situation might be different in actual scenarios. In the next moment, a professor slammed his hand down on the table. He glared at Ariel, accusing her of making excuses once again. If that were true, then the God's Eye program should be abolished entirely. Ariel was visibly shaken, insisting that they didn't understand. Gray's abilities went far beyond ordinary sword techniques. A suffocating tension enveloped the entire conference room. In the end, the headmaster decided to conclude the meeting, announcing that the God's Eye students would participate in the Gray battle. Their future plans would be determined based on their performance in the event. Ariel's heart sank. This was the outcome she dreaded the most. Budra spoke confidently, as if his scheme had succeeded, expressing his eagerness for the upcoming match. With that, the meeting concluded. Before leaving, the Sword Saint cast a heavy glance at Ariel, filled with concern. Ariel sat alone, unmoving. She understood better than anyone that Gray's true power could not be fully showcased in mock battles, yet his status within the academy was simply too low. Despite having no other options, she still hoped Gray could accomplish something in the intergrade match. Ariel was on the verge of breaking down. If Gray failed to prove himself, the God's Eye program might be abolished, and every God's Eye student would face expulsion. She could only place her hopes in Gray. Finally, the day of the intergrade battle had arrived. All the students gathered to witness the confrontation between the first-year and second-year students. The first contestant introduced was Leon Hart, the top swordsman from the previous year. His opponent was Harmek, the top student of the second year. Next, the first-year challenger, Gray, was introduced. His opponent would be Deber. The moment Gray saw him, recognition hit hard. This was the same man who had ambushed him in the corridor. Was he really about to confront him directly? Several rows of professors filled the stands, all eyes fixed on the upcoming battle. Budra watched Gray with open disdain, eager to discover the true strength of this special admit. Leon asked his opponent if intergrade matches were always observed by so many professors. The answer was no. This was unprecedented. Last year, only 3 fencing professors had bothered to attend. Harmek was just as puzzled by the unexpectedly large turnout. Suddenly, a realization struck the sharp-minded Leon. With a confident grin, he declared that the professors must be curious about Gray, noting that their taste was impeccable. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became, while Harmon beside him could only stare in disbelief. Was the first-year ace truly admiring that special admit? From the stands, Boudre confirmed Leon's guess, revealing that they were there to witness the final battle of a special God's Eye event. Gray couldn't grasp what final was supposed to mean. Hearing his question, Boudre turned to Ariel and asked if she had not informed him. With a mocking smile, he told Gray that the Academy was about to abolish the God's Special Admit program. Gray was completely stunned. He turned to Ariel and asked if it was true. Ariel lowered her head in silence, her lack of response speaking volumes. She hadn't revealed the truth earlier because she was worried. If Gray learned what she knew, she was certain he would wield that power recklessly. In his current state, that would be tantamount to suicide. Forcing a faint smile, she attempted to reassure him, saying that Boudre was merely trying to distract him. He needed to ignore it and concentrate on the fight. Despite this, Gray noticed her hands trembling ever so slightly. He slowly closed his eyes and spoke calmly. Since the professor had already mentioned it, Boudre snorted from the side, suggesting they were free to make fools of themselves. In his eyes, once Gray faced a pitiful defeat, the other professors would finally see that Ariel and the gods had lost their former edge. Gray finally expressed what he had left unsaid. With the professor having spoken, he felt he could no longer stand by in silence. Boudre's expression finally revealed a hint of surprise. Gray made it clear that he didn't mind being humiliated himself, but he would never allow anyone to question Professor Ariel's judgment. Ariel appeared equally shocked. She hadn't anticipated Gray would make such a statement in public. Boudre pointed at Gray and sneered, claiming he couldn't understand what power Ariel had supposedly sensed in him. Unlike her, most of the professors who hadn't lost their faculties were convinced that Gray would lose miserably. Instead of anger, Gray felt a surge of excitement. If that was the case, he would prove Boudre wrong. Boudre was so furious that he nearly stormed down from the stands, but the professors beside him quickly held him back. Ariel slowly lowered her head, a sense of unease stirring within her. At that moment, the referee announced for the contestants to split into groups and assemble with their teammates. Ariel felt a deep sense of worry. If Gray were facing an ordinary top student, she might have felt some relief. His practical swordsmanship might have provided him with a slim chance of survival. What truly frightened her was the opponent he was about to face. Diver had undergone surgical modifications to his brain, enhancing his reaction speed to an almost inhuman level. He was practically a living weapon. For Gray, who depended on ambush tactics, Diver was the worst possible opponent, and it all traced back to that madman. She silently prayed that Gray would refrain from using that power. Even if he faced defeat, he must not resort to it. To ease his mind, Ariel spoke gently, encouraging Gray to fight well and not to worry about her. Above all, she urged him not to push himself too hard. Gray chuckled softly and assured her that he understood. She didn't need to worry. Soon after, the showdown between the top students began, as both representatives stepped into the arena. The referee explained that protective magic had been deployed throughout the arena. Once lethal damage was detected, the protection mechanism would activate and determine the victor. The contestants were instructed to fight as if it were real combat. Both fighters were confident in their ability to take each other down. This clash between the Academy's elite students drew immense attention. As soon as the match began, Leon Hart quickly closed the distance. Harmanke responded with fiery enthusiasm. "Good! Your burst speed is impressive. Let me see what you've got." Two sharp sounds sliced through the air as their movements blurred, blades clashing in rapid succession. When they reappeared, the battle had already escalated into a fierce struggle. In that moment, Harmanke stomped forward, his gaze transformed entirely. Killing intent surged as his sword sliced toward Leon Hart's vitals. Leon Hart ducked low to evade, and a familiar sequence ensued. He propped one arm against the ground. He kicked out without hesitation, but the motion lacked fluidity, allowing Harmanke to evade. Leon Hart let out a sigh. He knew he couldn't fight like Gray did. Harmanke openly praised Leon Hart, stating that he was impressive and far stronger than Harmanke had been in his first year. Excited, Harmanke suggested picking up the pace, eager to see if Leon Hart could keep up. Leon Hart reacted swiftly, yet he remained entirely subdued. Before long, he found himself pressed against the barrier. Harmanke seized the moment and slashed directly at his neck. The protection magic activated immediately, marking the defeat of Leon Hart. Both fighters drew their swords. Next was the second match. As Leon Hart brushed past, he wished Gray good luck. Gray silently thanked him. He had already made bold claims, and now he needed to back them up. Before time had ever rewound, Gray had defeated countless monsters of despair. In comparison, his odds here were not hopeless. Nearby, a sword scraped against the ground as someone drew closer. The man coldly muttered that Professor Budra could wait in hell, adding that he would send Gray there soon enough. It became evident that this formidable opponent was determined to engage in a genuine life-and-death struggle. Gray's intergrade duel against the second-year diver officially began. At the opening bell, Gray surged forward without hesitation. To his surprise, his lightning-fast strike was caught head-on. Diver countered effortlessly, sending Gray flying. The sheer force of the blow left him stunned. Even now, Gray's arm trembled from the force of the impact. Ariel had warned him about Diver's enhanced reaction speed, but Gray hadn't anticipated such overwhelming power. The gap was vast, and no tricks could close it. He still had one final trump card, but using it would come at a great cost to him. Ariel had warned him never to tap into that power, as it could lead to his death. Gray had made a promise. Ariel understood the stakes, but she never wanted Gray to risk his life. Even worse, the arena's barrier might not be able to withstand that power, potentially killing the opponent outright. Torn between victory and restraint, Gray found himself hesitating. At that moment, Diver rushed in at a terrifying speed. Gray had no choice but to adapt quickly. He raised his sword just in time to barely block another strike. With a swift flick of the wrist, Diver launched another seamless attack. The moves themselves were straightforward. However, with Diver's physique and reflexes, defeating Gray should have been a breeze. The Diver possessed plenty of skill. He was simply choosing to hold back. Suddenly, Diver broke into a sinister smile. Gray felt a chill run down his spine. The Diver's attack broke through his defense. The next strike was aimed directly at Gray's eyes. An escape felt impossible. Yet Gray blocked it, leaving him stunned. Why had Diver slowed down at that moment? Gray forced Diver back, his mind racing. There was no way he should have been able to block that attack in time. The realization unsettled him. Diver could have ended the fight, but chose not to. From the stands, Ariel immediately sensed that something was off. Diver's overall attributes were unusually high. Without hesitation, she activated God's Eye. In her vision, a mass of violet flames burned within Diver's heart. A power so enigmatic that even Ariel couldn't identify its source. One thing was certain, that flame was extremely dangerous. Several professors nearby sneered as the match had already turned one-sided. Was her prize student still refusing to surrender? They proceeded to mock the second-year students, commenting on their unpleasant temperament. They could have easily ended the fight at any moment, yet chose to prolong it, finding a disturbing sort of amusement in the situation. The God's Eye student was already struggling to block the attacks, yet he still refused to concede. Didn't that alone demonstrate his lack of strength? Professor Budra watched with open amusement. He even suggested that perhaps Gray already knew the God's Eye program was about to be abolished and was stalling on purpose, sending a clear signal that if things continued this way, the entire special emission system would spiral out of control. Another professor quickly echoed this sentiment, praising Gray as a remarkably considerate student who genuinely cared about the academy. At that moment, Ariel interrupted them sharply, demanding that the fight be stopped immediately. It was too dangerous. Budra looked puzzled and asked what danger she was referring to. Was she talking about the simulated battle? One professor assumed that Ariel simply didn't know and calmly explained that the arena was protected by powerful defensive spells. Any attack capable of causing fatal harm would be automatically blocked. That protection manifested as an almost invisible blue barrier, which is precisely why students could engage in battles without fear. Ariel insisted that the fight be stopped immediately, unless there was another reason to continue. She understood that clearly, but it still wasn't enough to protect Gray. As soon as her words left her lips, a terrifying surge of energy erupted from Diver. A black miasma spilled outward, spreading even toward the stance. A chill ran through Ariel, intensifying her sense of dread. Something was clearly wrong with him. Diver wasn't just fighting. He intended to kill Gray. Diver took an opening stance, dark energy swirling around his blade. With a thunderous crack, he swung without hesitation, unleashing a blade wave that tore straight ahead. Gray felt his heart seize. This power was far beyond anything he could face directly. The sword's light shot skyward as a massive explosion shook the entire arena. Moments later, Gray swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the sheer force of it all. A deep gash split the arena in two. If he had reacted any slower, he would have been cleaved in half. What shocked him even more was that the defensive array had been breached. His magical protection was rendered completely useless. Fortunately, Diver hadn't broken through the final barrier. Otherwise, even Budra could have been killed. Seizing the moment, Ariel attempted to forcefully halt the match. She had warned them that the barrier couldn't withstand Diver's attacks. She raised her hand and unleashed magic, fury burning in her eyes. That damn Bradley implanting something like this into a student. Ariel tried to breach the defensive formation and enter the arena to confront Dibir directly. However, her power was insufficient to breach the barrier, preventing her from using binding magic. With no other option, she shouted to those behind her that this was an emergency. The barrier needed to be lifted, and the match had to be canceled. Otherwise, lives would be at risk. The professors were paralyzed by fear, unable to respond. This was a grim preview of why they would be the first to flee when humanity confronted true catastrophe. Ariel glanced back at the battlefield. Stopping the fight from the outside would take far too long, and she wasn't sure if Gray could hold out. She signaled for him to retreat and buy some time. Gray wanted to run, but only if he could truly escape. In the next moment, Dibir launched another attack, clinging to Gray like a shadow. Turning his back even once would mean certain death. The sheer force of that strike sent waves of fear rippling through the watching students. The Sword Saint observed in silence, aware that the professor's spells would take at least 30 seconds to reach the arena. In a battle like this, that was far too long. They had no real choice left. It may still be early, but the Sword Saint believed that Gray would rise to the challenge. Back on the battlefield, Gray continuously shifted his position, narrowly evading Dibir's attacks. The Sword Saint rose to his feet and shouted for Gray to envision his body as a blade. He urged him to stop swinging the sword and instead harness that power to propel himself forward. Gray heard every word, but the problem was that Dibir left him no breathing room. Despite this, Gray trusted that the Sword Saint wouldn't lead him astray. He quickly increased the distance between himself and Dibir. Gray drilled the thought into his mind. He was a lone blade, concentrating every ounce of strength into a single point. He no longer cared about the attacks coming at him. He forced the idea deeper and deeper into his mind. I am the sword. Dibir's strike closed in, yet Gray remained completely still. With a deafening crash, Dibir's attack slammed into the defensive barrier once again, and shock spread across his face. Gray had somehow materialized behind him, his entire body enveloped in a terrifying surge of power. Dibir was shaken. How could Gray's speed have increased so drastically in an instant? In the next moment, Gray launched his counterattack without hesitation. As expected, protective magic flared to life around Dibir's body. As Gray infused more power into his blade, Dibir's protective device started to crack and splinter. Then Dibir was sent flying backward. The strike had missed his vitals, but that was no longer significant. The protection had been breached. Gray had already claimed victory. The impact created a massive crater in the arena floor. Budra stood frozen in terror, never imagining that Gray's attack could shatter the defensive barrier. What kind of fight was this? The Sword Saint quickly alerted the referee to check on the other student, insisting that the strike shouldn't have hit anything vital. The referee quickly summoned the medical team. In the next instant, a massive hand emerged from the crater, enveloped in dark energy. The Sword Saint's expression darkened. This one truly is. Black energy surged violently around Dibir's body, causing his hair to stand on end. He threw his head back and roared at the sky, a clear indication that he had completely lost his sanity. Ariel quickly warned Gray that the fight wasn't over and that he needed to stay on guard. A chill ran down Gray's spine as every instinct screamed the same warning. Run! Waves of black energy surged toward him, bringing with them not only overwhelming pressure but also a genuine destructive force. This relentless onslaught forced Gray to retreat repeatedly in order to maintain his distance. From Gray's perspective, the speed of those attacks still wasn't sufficient to deliver a clean hit. However, the arena platform was already being torn apart by the black energy. Professor Budra stood frozen in shock as chaos erupted around him, with people fleeing in every direction. Meanwhile, several mages from the magic division arrived and began dismantling the barrier, a process that would take at least 10 seconds. 10 seconds on the battlefield felt excruciatingly long enough to determine life or death. Gray had only one goal now, to survive those 10 seconds and wait for rescue. But facing a completely unhinged opponent, that hope seemed slim. Dibir was genuinely trying to kill. Dibir's figure blurred, and in an instant, he was right in front of Gray so fast that it barely registered. Gray barely managed to lift his sword in time to block the attack. The sheer power and speed sent a shiver through him. This was not something a human body could produce. Dibir was beyond abnormal. Gray came to a bitter realization. He was no longer normal either. In the next moment, their movements mirrored one another as both figures disappeared from their spots. When Gray reappeared, he was already positioned behind Dibir, his attack fully charged. The same killing intent burned in Gray's eyes. With his opponent genuinely intent on taking his life, there was no reason for him to hold back any longer. No matter how quick Diver's reactions were, they still appeared slow in Gray's eyes. Then, without warning, Gray spat out a mouthful of blood. The mysterious power within him was clearly pushing his body beyond its limits. Outside the arena, Ariel was frantic, shouting for Gray to retreat at once and stop fighting. But she didn't realize that turning her back now would mean certain death. Diver's power had exceeded all expectations. Gray's only option was to retaliate. In that moment, Gray channeled every ounce of mysterious power he could muster into his sword. If this was a fight to the death, he was determined to see it through. Still, it wasn't sufficient. He craved more power. After a brief moment, Gray felt the energy fully converge. This was his time. The hunt had begun. With a sickening rip, 2 severed arms flew into the air. Diver's body was sent flying backward, his arms completely severed. Gray hadn't aimed for the head on purpose. He was seeking answers. What kind of surgery had transformed Diver into something like this? Diver's pupils went blank, and after a single scream, he lost consciousness. Aside from sparing his life, Gray had shown no mercy whatsoever. With a heavy thud, Diver collapsed to his knees, black energy continuing to pour from his severed arms. Ariel stood frozen in shock, and the 2 magic professors behind her were equally stunned. Gray had actually defeated him. By the time the fight concluded, the entire arena platform lay in ruins. At that moment, the barrier was finally lifted, and a large group of instructors rushed in, led by Ariel. Without a word, Ariel swiftly bound the student in restraints, showing no concern for the severity of his injuries. Gray shakily pushed himself to his feet, believing the battle was finally over, but in the very next moment, a wave of discomfort surged through him. Blood erupted from all sides at once. The wounds he had sustained during the fight, forcibly suppressed until now, finally burst open. The sight nearly terrified Ariel. "You can't die on me, Gray," she urged. She channeled every last drop of her magic into healing and poured it into his injuries. At that moment, 3 professors rushed in from behind. Spotting them, Ariel quickly urged them to help and cast healing spells on Gray as well. Soon, Gray felt a warm current envelop his entire body, and his eyes slowly opened. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. The status of gods, I must admit, was finally secured. When Gray regained consciousness, Ariel exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. In the next moment, she froze. She never expected Gray to rise to his feet so quickly. The 2 professors stared at him in disbelief. "Are you sure you're really fine? You stood up way too fast." Gray turned to Ariel and asked her to examine him with the eye of a god. Ariel slowly removed her glasses, a blue light flaring from her left pupil. As she analyzed Gray's condition, shock overtook her expression. She could hardly believe it. After exerting such immense power, his soul showed no signs of damage whatsoever. His body had already been fully restored by healing magic, so there shouldn't be any pain remaining at all. The Sword Saint chuckled from the side. "Looks like it worked. We successfully reduced the backlash." Everything had unfolded exactly as Gray had anticipated. Ariel snapped back angrily. "You call this reducing backlash when the buffering was cut?" Confused by her tone, the Sword Saint glanced over, sensing that something was amiss. There stood Ariel, bristling with fury. Without his defensive magic, he would have been dead. The Sword Saint gestured for her to calm down. "We managed to keep his injuries within the limits that healing magic can handle. Given the circumstances, this is already a positive outcome." Regardless, the Sword Saint hoped that one day Gray would be able to withstand the backlash on his own, though that would take time. Only then did Gray truly realize that the brutal training he had endured was all leading to this moment. Although many things had deviated from the plan, the outcome remained acceptable. Ariel then glanced at Diver, now reduced to a human stump by Gray, and said coldly, "That man's killing intent was far too strong." She turned to the professors beside her and said, "Please go ahead and confirm the result of this match." Her voice was calm yet firm. "If you weren't blind, you would have already noticed that Diver's magical defenses were forcibly activated by my attack. Therefore, the winner is the first-year student, Gray." The stands erupted at once. A first-year defeating a second-year prodigy was unheard of. Defining cheers followed as Lord Gray showcased his incredible abilities. All of God's Eye Special admits are indeed monsters. This single battle also ended the first year's 35-match losing streak. To be honest, the Sword Saint no longer cared about that record. After witnessing this duel, who could possibly argue that Ariel's judgment, guided by the God's Eye, was flawed? The Dean chuckled softly. "In light of this scene, we must acknowledge him. From this day forward, no one will support the abolition of the God's Eye special admission slot. he continued, stating that we should feel ashamed for ever considering it. We nearly expelled a student of such extraordinary talent. Ariel chose not to participate in the professor's discussion, opting instead to stand quietly off to the side. Her body trembled slightly with excitement. Gray truly surprised me today. A smile spread across her face, and emotion welled up in her eyes. A bald professor spoke up, stating that those advocating for the abolition of the God's Eye program should be the ones reflecting on their responsibilities. As soon as he said that, everyone's attention turned to Boudre and the others. Cold sweat dripped down their foreheads, rendering them utterly speechless. Shortly after, they quickly made excuses and slipped away, feeling embarrassed. As they watched the retreating figures, laughter spread through the crowd. Someone muttered, "Never oppose a god." It seems that old saying still holds true. However, compared to before, things have become much gentler. Times have changed. Ariel continued to argue with the Sword Saint, who clearly had no intention of engaging, knowing he wouldn't win. Unbeknownst to her, Gray quietly observed Ariel. A question forming in his mind: had something occurred in the professor's past? Just then, the dean's voice came from behind Gray. "Now that the interference is gone, let's discuss a few matters that concern us." Gray felt curious and unsure about what the dean could possibly want from him. In the next instant, he caught a hint in the dean's gaze, likely regarding the mysterious power within him. Rather than stating it directly, Gray inquired about the topic the dean wished to discuss with him. The dean spoke solemnly. After all, a simulation battle that was meant to be completely safe nearly put a student's life in danger. With that, the dean offered Gray a formal apology, acknowledging that the academy bore full responsibility for failing to detect the anomaly in advance. This was exactly why he had come to express his regret. Gray let out a light chuckle, relieved that the dean wasn't inquiring about that power itself. "There's no need to worry, Dean. In the end, no real damage was done." The dean adjusted his glasses and said, "Thank you for your understanding." Then his tone shifted after Diver went berserk. "Did you also unleash some kind of mysterious power?" Gray sighed inwardly. The academy was indeed playing the same game: courtesy first, pressure second. This was exactly what he had feared. Maintaining a calm expression, he replied, "Dean, that didn't seem like magic. It felt like something far more bizarre, a type of power that modern magical theory can't even begin to analyze." The dean showed a clear interest and asked why Gray would choose to study such a power. Gray slowly closed his eyes, unsure of how to respond. No explanation could fully capture the power that resided within him. Before his return, he couldn't reveal anything, especially since the mastermind behind the perjurer remained hidden in an unknown location. So he simply said, "I don't know." The dean didn't buy it. "You don't know? You've used that power yourself, yet you claim ignorance." Gray replied evenly, "That's correct. I don't know." He continued, saying that he wasn't even aware such a power existed within him. It was Professor Ariel who discovered it and explained it to him. Ariel glanced at Gray, uncertain of his intentions. After all, every word he had just spoken was a lie. When he defeated the Ogre General, he had already been wielding that power freely. Gray shot her a subtle look, the message clear: play along to stop the perjurer. He needed her to continue acting as if she were in control of that power. Ariel understood immediately. "So, that's your plan?" Thorough as ever, truth be told. He didn't seem like someone experiencing life for the first time. Could he be one of those reincarnators from novels? She quickly dismissed the thought as absurd. Ariel walked over slowly. "Since he trusts me this much, I have no choice but to step forward for him." She then explained to the dean that, as you mentioned, Gray's power cannot be analyzed through magical theory. However, with my eyes, I can see him clearly. After observing that power, I asked Professor Siskett Longfellow, whose affinity is particularly compatible, to assist him. This collaboration made today's level of control possible. I am still researching how to effectively guide that power. She paused before asking, "So, would you allow me to take full responsibility for everything related to Gray's power?" The dean nodded. "After witnessing that battle firsthand, I cannot refuse your request." He made his decision on the spot. From now on, whether it concerns Gray or the entire group of gods, all salvation operations will be under Professor Ariel's command. If the academy can provide any assistance, do not hesitate to ask. Upon hearing this, both Gray and Ariel froze for a moment. The dean was effectively granting Ariel full authority. They exchanged a glance, unmistakable joy reflected in both of their eyes. The dean continued, "Now, let's head to the underground special medical ward to examine Diver. I'll need your eyes. Come with me." Ariel left alongside the dean. In the blink of an eye, 3 hours had gone by. As soon as her investigation concluded, Ariel immediately summoned Gray. The analysis revealed that the power used within Diver was nearly identical to that of the Purger. The energy Diver unleashed perfectly matched what they had previously observed in the laboratory. There was no doubt he had used the same type of crystal that originated from that research facility. Still, Gray couldn't help but wonder what Diver had truly experienced. What Ariel said next was shocking. In reality, that man had been dead for a long time. His soul retained only the capacity to receive and execute commands. Once that power was activated, Diver lost all control. Everything stemmed from that force. It's possible that the moment the power was implanted in him, the individual known as Diver ceased to exist. He specifically came to challenge you because you remarked that it was retaliation following Professor Bradley's death. At that moment, a crucial question emerged in Gray's mind. If Diver had been tampered with only after Varian's death, it indicated that a third party was involved. Ariel, sharp as ever, had already reached the same conclusion. There's something much bigger hidden behind this. I'll keep digging into these connections, but it will take time. Her instinct suggested that the Academy was likely entangled in all of this. The World Union Academy was much more complex than it seemed at first glance. Gray expressed his understanding and asked her to inform him if there was anything he could assist with. Ariel rested her hand on the window, savoring the lingering warmth of the setting sun. She thanked him softly, saying that without him, this situation would have ended in absolute defeat. "There's one more thing," she added. "As for your power, it seems you've learned how to use it without damaging your soul." Gray scratched the back of his head, feeling slightly embarrassed. "But the backlash on my body was worse than before." What Ariel said next left him puzzled. She reassured him not to worry, explaining that the Sword Saint had already advanced his training to the next stage. Joy surged through Gray. Could that really be true? This time, it was entirely thanks to the Sword Saint. Without him, Gray would never have understood the deeper momentum of that power. Ariel nodded in agreement. "Yes, he will personally guide your cultivation. As long as you train with him, you'll learn to control that power much better than you can now." The following day, Gray started his training with the Sword Saint. This time, countless mannequins stood upright around him. From behind, the Sword Saint called out loudly, emphasizing that training in a place like this is both dangerous and agonizing. If you're willing to take more time, there are safer options available. Behind him, several professors were watching closely, and by now, they were taking Gray very seriously. Gray nodded, indicating that only this type of high-risk training could truly unleash his power. Recognizing his determination, the Sword Saint ceased his attempts to persuade him. "In that case, let us begin." Gray gradually closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. He recalled the Sword Saint's earlier words, "Become the sword, a lone sword." He concentrated on that sensation, and gradually, a mysterious power began to surface along his blade. Before he realized it, that power had coursed through his entire body. At that moment, Gray opened his eyes, signaling the start of his training. With a sharp whoosh, he swung his sword, shattering every mannequin before him in an instant. The strike was impossibly fast. Once that power enveloped the blade, even a casual slash was sufficient to obliterate them completely. Wherever he passed, a single cut of light was enough. Mannequins ahead shattered into fragments. His goal for the day was simple: destroy everything and do it in the shortest time possible. The other professors stared in shock. His speed was nearly unbelievable. The Sword Saint, however, wore a different expression, one far more complicated, as he had already pinpointed the core of Gray's problem. Gray then swung his sword toward another mannequin. In the next instant, his body split open once more, blood gushing from new wounds. Despite that, Gray knew he absolutely could not stop. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he swung again. After that strike, his body finally gave way. At that moment, the professors behind him stepped in, spreading their hands as healing magic surged forth to restore his body. As the healing magic coursed through him, the blood on Gray's forehead gradually disappeared. He appeared as if nothing had happened at all and expressed his gratitude to them. The Sword Saint laughed heartily. "Not bad. You lasted a bit longer than last time. With enough practice, your body will eventually learn to withstand the backlash." Gray flexed his wrist, suddenly aware of something he had overlooked while he was fully focused just moments before. At that moment, he was in a near-berserk state, which is why he barely felt any pain. But the truth was quite the opposite. Using that power was excruciating. The Sword Saint approached him slowly. "Pain and torment signify that you're pushing beyond your limits. That being said, I understand that this type of training may feel excessive. Ultimately, the choice to continue is yours." Gray responded with determination, pushing through the overtraining. He had to keep moving forward, as he simply didn't have time to waste. He asked the Sword Saint to run it again, determined to push his body to adapt as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the sharp sound of high heels echoed across the training ground, interrupting their moment. It was Professor Ariel, and she was clearly not pleased. She stated firmly that this training could only be done once a day for Gray's own sake, as repeating it could cause lasting damage. Gray insisted it was fine. His body had already been healed by other professors, and he believed that training this way wouldn't harm his soul. Ariel disagreed, believing that while physical injuries could heal, taking another heavy hit before his mind stabilized would be dangerous. At that moment, it could even influence the way you swing your sword. Gray understood this better than anyone. He had experienced it firsthand. That lingering issue was precisely why he had previously been unable to unleash his full power. The Sword Saint spoke up, expressing relief. Even I can't endure this kind of training multiple times a day, so it's best to listen to Ariel. With a loud crash, he dropped the armor he was holding onto the ground, the sound making its weight unmistakably clear. One of the professors asked in confusion, "Gray, why are you in such a hurry to grow stronger? You're already powerful enough." Ariel quickly stepped in. "That's on me. I dragged Gray into the conflict surrounding Professor Bradley, and now those in the shadows see him as an enemy." The Diber incident was just the beginning. Someone is lurking in the shadows of the Academy, and the criminal group known as the Blood Wipers, potentially seeking Bradley's magical catalyst, could strike at any moment. Even isolating Gray in a heavily guarded area wouldn't ensure his safety. The only solution is for him to grow stronger. This is the only path to survival. After hearing that, Gray placed his hand over his chest. He assured Ariel not to worry, explaining that stopping Liquid 4 was his own decision. Deep down, he knew that he had to put an end to it, or humanity would be doomed. Ariel nodded with satisfaction. "You're an outstanding student. All I can do is help you harness that power to its fullest." The Sword Saint suddenly burst into laughter. "The way you say that makes it sound like you already have a plan." Ariel continued, "Don't tell me you've forgotten the fastest and safest way for a swordsman to grow stronger." Upon hearing that, the Sword Saint turned to Gray, carefully inspecting him from head to toe. Gray stood there, observing him with curiosity. The Sword Saint let out a wry smile. "For a swordsman, the quickest solution is straightforward. Change your sword." Instinctively, Gray glanced down at the blade at his waist. It was a standard Academy-issued sword, touted as a top-tier custom weapon. Ariel explained that although the sword was top-tier by first-year standards, it simply couldn't withstand Gray's current power. Gray glanced down at the blade in his hand. Sure enough, chips and cracks had already formed. Just as Ariel had said, his current strength could easily destroy it. Ariel chuckled and reassured him, saying, "No need to worry. I'll take you to my vault and let you choose a truly high-grade weapon." The Sword Saint paused in mild surprise. "You mean you're really gonna let him pick one from there?" Ariel waved it off. "It's fine. Gray has more than earned it." She lifted her hand and sliced through the still air. In the next moment, a blinding blue light erupted. Gray stared at Ariel in disbelief as a doorway slowly materialized in the air before them. Ariel turned back with a smile. "Gray, why are you just standing there? Come in and pick a weapon already." The moment Gray stepped inside, he was left speechless. Piles of gold coins filled his vision, accompanied by an array of strange blueprints wealth that generations could never hope to accumulate in a lifetime. Before long, he would be selecting a weapon from this very vault. The place was so vast that even Ariel momentarily lost track of where the sword section was. Gray stood frozen, overwhelmed by the scene before him. The Sword Saint spoke slowly. "What you'll do today is simple. Choose a sword." He told Gray not to hold back and to choose the very best, as this opportunity would come only once. Surrounded by expertly crafted weapons, Gray felt uncertain about where to begin. Ariel laughed softly, realizing that sometimes having too many choices can make things more difficult. "Ideally, I want you to test every sword here at full power. However, due to your unique strength, we can only test one sword per day. Let's start by shortlisting a few options." She picked up the sharpest blade in sight. "We'll start with this one," she said. The moment Gray picked it up, he sensed something was wrong. It was far too heavy, significantly hindering his speed. Ariel was fully aware of that, but its cutting power was exceptional. With a snap of her fingers, a wooden post materialized in front of Gray. Gray swung his sword with precision. With a thunderous crash, the post shattered into pieces. The blade truly matched Ariel's description perfectly. Gray was stunned. It was the sharpest sword he had ever seen. Both Ariel and the Sword Saint sensed that the weapon wasn't quite right for him. Its power was undeniable, but in real combat, it might prove too unwieldy. No matter how sharp a sword is, missing the target renders it meaningless. Gray, however, disagreed. He believed that against massive, cumbersome enemies, divine beasts, or even structures, it could be the perfect weapon. Ariel advised him not to rush and offered him a magic storage pouch. As long as he carried it, the sword would not be a burden. Gray couldn't help but ask, "This sword, it's not something you can just give away, is it?" Ariel laughed and said, "What are you talking about? It's just been gathering dust here. Isn't it better for it to be used by someone who really needs it?" when you confront the enemies behind Varian who is truly summoning the Purger. Can you be certain you won't regret missing out on it? After considering it carefully, Gray had to acknowledge that she was right. Their presence or absence made no difference. Even if they trained with all their might, it wouldn't change the outcome. With that realization, he accepted the sword and thanked her sincerely. The Sword Saint approached and warned him, unless you plan to actually use it, try not to let others see you wield that blade. Gray found the remark puzzling. The Sword Saint explained that if it were put on the market, it would be worth at least 10 billion, or no less than 10,000 gold coins. The number left Gray utterly stunned. He had never encountered anything so absurd. He never imagined Ariel would give away something so valuable so casually, and he hurried to return it, only for her to refuse outright. No returns, especially not on items someone has already used. Seeing his expression, Ariel burst out laughing. If I say it's yours, then it's yours. That way, you won't hesitate when using it. Gray instinctively thought she must be joking. Ariel said seriously, I never joke. If spending 10 billion can secure the God's Eye admission slot, I would do it gladly. This sword is your reward. Confronted with such a remarkable gift, Gray still hesitated. Ariel raised an eyebrow. What? Are you saying that a mere 10 billion isn't worth my effort? Do I really have so little value? At that moment, Gray finally accepted the sword with a smile and promised to take good care of it. Only then did a satisfied smile appear on Ariel's face. In addition, there are many standard swords available for everyday combat. Come take a look. Gray never expected Ariel's vault to be this astonishing. Beside him, the Sword Saint sighed. In this world, no one has eyes as sharp as those of God's Eye. Ariel. In other words, her eyes had the power to make money at will. Ariel turned to the Sword Saint and asked, as a teacher, which one do you think is the best? The Sword Saint began to examine the collection with great care. His gaze soon settled on a sword with a golden hilt. Gray, try this one. See how it feels. Gray picked up the sword and examined it closely. With a sharp whoosh, he swung the blade, and the sensation was incredible. It felt remarkably light in his hands. He followed up with several more swings, the air slicing through with a crisp, satisfying sound. After more than 20 consecutive swings, the sword began to feel increasingly comfortable in his hands. It was a well-crafted blade, but something felt off. Was it just unfamiliarity? The Sword Saint, having observed everything, spoke up. It doesn't suit you. Try another. He stepped aside and added, this one was created for experimental purposes. It might be a better match. Tilting his head, he gestured and said, I think you'll like this one. When Gray saw the blade, he froze for 2 full seconds. It was clearly special, captivating him instantly. The moment the Sword Saint was introduced, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Gray came to a sudden halt. This sword was truly extraordinary. The Sword Saint instructed him to pick it up and get a feel for it. The moment Gray grasped it, his eyes widened in surprise. It was much lighter than he had anticipated. He quickly noticed something else. The blade wasn't sharpened at all. The Sword Saint explained, this sword was designed to test new technology, not for combat. It's an unsharpened block of steel, but incredibly durable. Gray, this one might truly suit you. Gray asked, so you're saying that with my current power, I don't actually need a sharpened blade? The Sword Saint nodded and replied, exactly. I doubt any blade, no matter how strong, can truly contain your power. The Sword Saint studied Gray closely. If you continue to grow stronger, then every sword here may eventually become more of a hindrance than a tool. In that case, wouldn't it be better to envision a future where you no longer depend on a blade's edge to fight? After a moment, Gray slowly returned the sword. In the next instant, the Sword Saint struck, effortlessly cleaving the iron post in 2. Was this the true power of the Sword Saint? But that wasn't the end of it. Moments later, the shattered metal began to transform, melting into a cement-like slurry. Gray was completely stunned. This wasn't merely cutting through steel, it was total destruction. Ariel sighed. You're just showing off, aren't you? Personally, I think Gray should stick to using a sword. Still, testing it won't hurt. She then asked, is there anything else you want to try? If you're interested in weapons beyond swords, I can show you other sections. Gray glanced around and shook his head. I'll pass. There are simply too many weapons here. Testing each one individually would waste too much valuable training time. He chose to test a few more before departing. His gaze landed on a red blade, lighter than the first yet seemingly sturdier. Gray began to move toward. Suddenly, he came to a halt. His gaze wandered, sensing something unusual. Looking up, he saw a slender white sword that was long and narrow. What unsettled him was the strange sense of familiarity. It felt as though he had encountered it before. He asked Ariel, do you know anything about this sword? Ariel paused to reflect. It had been left behind by a former student after graduation. While it wasn't a legendary blade, it was certainly well crafted. That response only fueled Gray's eagerness to test it himself. Gray reached out, and the moment his hand closed around the hilt, he felt an incredible comfort, as if the sword fit his palm perfectly. He approached a wooden post and gave the blade a gentle shake. In the next moment, he swung down forcefully, slicing the post cleanly in half. The outcome surprised even Ariel and the Sword Saint. Gray was overjoyed. He hadn't expected the sword to suit him so perfectly. It felt as though he had been training with this blade since the moment he was born. The familiarity etched deeply into his instincts. Ariel burst into laughter as she approached. "Looks like you really like that sword, Gray." Gray nodded, clearly pleased. Staring at the blade, he spoke softly, unable to hide his excitement. It was the best-fitting sword he had ever used in his life. Ariel waved her hand and urged, "Keep going. Let's see if it truly matches your power." That made Gray hesitate. "Wasn't this sword left behind by one of your students? What if he broke it?" Ariel shook her head. "Don't worry. Compared to collecting dust on a shelf, I'm sure this sword would prefer to be used by someone." Thinking it over, Gray had to agree. No sword wanted to be forgotten in a vault forever. He then asked who the alumnus was that forged the sword. Ariel replied, his name was Metallum. The moment he heard that name, Gray froze in place. Of course he knew it. The greatest magic swordmaster in history, Metallum Norlum, was hailed as the prodigy who broke blades. He never imagined that this sword was his own creation. After that, they exited the vault. Today, they would test just this one sword. Ariel smiled. "To test its strength and durability, I want you to push this sword to its limits." She handed the blade back to Gray, and as he noticed her relaxed expression, a subtle ripple stirred in his heart. Before he struck, Ariel added, "We'll start with the most unusual sword and see how your power affects it." Gray approached the wooden post once again. He gradually closed his eyes, tapping into the mysterious power within him. The familiar red energy surged across his body, a force he could now summon with ease. But the moment he opened his eyes, the momentum he had built up scattered. Gray frowned. This was the first time anything like this had occurred. He glanced down at the sword. "Give me a second. I'll try again." Once again, he concentrated his power, enveloping the blade with it. In his mind, he repeated the same thought. "I am the sword. Let my power merge with." Yet again, the same thing occurred. The energy was dispersed by the sword itself. Confusion set in. Why couldn't his power adhere to the blade at all? Sensing something was wrong, Ariel stepped forward. "Gray, do you feel anything unusual in your body?" But he felt nothing out of the ordinary. Ariel thought for a moment. If that's the case, then the problem lies with the sword. Let's set it aside and try another one. She gently reassured him, saying that perhaps it simply doesn't resonate with his unique power, so he shouldn't be discouraged. Ariel reached for the storage pouch at her waist. "If that's the case, let's test the most ordinary sword this time." Her gaze sharpened as she slowly drew a blade from her hand. "Try this one. I'm certain it'll surprise you." The moment Gray accepted Ariel's sword, he felt a surge of power coursing through him. He prepared himself, silently repeating that he was a lone blade, determined to merge completely with the weapon. Gradually, the mysterious power began to surface along the sword. In the next instant, red energy enveloped his entire body, and this time, it remained intact. Gray chuckled, realizing it worked. It seemed the problem had indeed been the sword from before. Just then, his eyes narrowed as a sudden voice echoed in his mind, urging him to act while there was still time. The unexpected words froze him in place. He turned to Ariel and the Sword Saint, but neither of them reacted. Only he had heard. The mysterious voice spoke again, but its meaning remained completely unclear to him. From behind, the Sword Saint realized that containing and carrying Gray's power within the sword was no longer a concern. Gray charged into the puppet formation alone. In the next instant, he disappeared from where he stood. With a swift slash, his blade cut through the armored target ahead. Examining the output, Gray found the power to be similar to before, but the motion was significantly different. The journey ahead promises to be smoother, with challenges becoming more manageable and obstacles fading into the background. As we move forward, we can expect a clearer path and a more enjoyable experience. Another strike landed, slicing through the armor once more. The fluidity of each movement made every swing seem effortless. His body felt incredibly light. With a single leap, he covered a vast distance. With swift precision, Gray moved and struck in one fluid motion, cutting down dozens of armored puppets in mere moments. His sword aura functioned like an automatic scan, effortlessly identifying and eliminating his targets. Every piece of armor that came into contact with that aura was severed instantly. The sight left every professor present in awe. This speed was on an entirely different level than before. From a distance, Gray's body had vanished, leaving only intersecting streaks of red sword light behind. It felt as though he were flying with complete freedom, elevating his state to its peak. With a heavy clang, another strike severed an armored head clean off. His gaze sharpened as he readied himself to push further and test his absolute speed limit. In the next moment, he froze. Every wooden post in front of him had already been destroyed. That surprised him. The objective was complete, yet time felt unnaturally brief. He scanned the area. The number of targets remained the same as before, but his speed had more than doubled. In the same amount of time, he would have cleared only half before. Now, he had wiped them all out. Watching from a distance, Ariel fell into deep thought. She called out to Gray, but there was no response. That unsettled everyone. Why was he still standing there, unresponsive? Realizing something was wrong, Ariel shouted, "Gray, can you hear me?" At that very moment, the sword slipped from Gray's hand and struck the ground. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his body bending forward uncontrollably. Seeing this, all the professors simultaneously cast healing magic, determined to keep Gray safe. A powerful restorative force enveloped him, enabling him to stand once more. Despite that, his body felt completely drained. The situation left him confused. It hadn't been as severe as the last time, so why was he unable to exert any strength? The Sword Saint advised him not to overexert himself and to return with him first. Ariel assessed the situation. Even with healing magic, excessive blood loss can drain your stamina. You need to rest. The Sword Saint remarked that Gray had surpassed a limit that should not have been possible. This was a positive sign, but one that should not be pushed further. Ariel crouched down to pick up the longsword, cautioning that acting without a dedicated healer was extremely dangerous in real combat. She gently swung the blade and activated God's Eye, meticulously examining its condition. Ariel was astonished to discover that, despite the intense testing, the blade showed no signs of damage. This was truly a rare weapon. The student who left this sword behind was clearly no ordinary individual. What troubled her even more was the blade's glow, which seemed brighter than before. Was it merely her imagination, or was this weapon truly capable of growth? Ariel examined the light reflecting off the blade more closely, and the longer she stared, the more she sensed that something was amiss. In the next instant, she spun around sharply, her gaze locking on to the source of the killing intent she had sensed in the distance. Gray asked in confusion, "Professor, what is it?" At that moment, a thunderous explosion erupted from the direction of the teaching buildings. The shockwave roared past, whipping Ariel's hair wildly into the air. Gray and the Sword Saint were both taken aback by the sight before them. What on earth was happening? Another deafening boom echoed as chunks of debris crashed down in front of. Looking up, they saw that the front of the World United Academy was already engulfed in smoke and flames. Students fled in panic, terror etched on their faces. Some instructors had already activated barrier spells, prioritizing the safety of nearby students. The scene left Gray momentarily stunned. It had all unfolded far too suddenly. The Sword Saint spoke slowly, explaining that the area contains the Academy's hazardous materials vault. Soon, Gray noticed an eerie red flame raging within the wreckage, indicating that this explosion was clearly deliberate. As the metal structure shattered, the Sword Saint noticed traces resembling teleportation magic. Are they truly daring to raid the Academy's headquarters? One of the professors immediately objected, stating that the treasury walls were safeguarded by powerful anti-teleportation wards, which could withstand most explosive spells. Only Ariel understood the true nature of the situation. She sensed the energy of the purger mingling with the smoke, and hearing that made Gray's heart sink. With a serious expression, Ariel explained that the attackers had likely used special crystals produced in the underground laboratories to breach the outer walls and disable the anti-teleportation field. At that moment, Gray could no longer remain calm. The perpetrators behind the explosion were clearly Varian's allies, who had audaciously dared to attack the Academy itself.